sabrinasalvati.
It is very clear that there is a certain, segment of the Muslim voting community that has decided to support your campaign. And that is in the swing states where I've shown people those numbers. I want to hear a little bit more about maybe some of the internal polls that you've seen, if you can discuss it.
So just to be clear, the Muslim vote has been completely lost by the Democratic Party, and it is not coming back. So Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, as soon as I got on the team, took a meeting with Dalia Mugahed, who's done polling in the Muslim community for the last 10 years. She's now senior researcher, and she showed me the numbers. Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, 3 swing states, which are essentially demographically, for the purposes of the African-American percentage of the population and the Muslim percentage of the population, they're the same state, okay, demographically. And in those 3 states together, 65% of the Muslims voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Joe Biden was polling at 12% in January 2024. They were dead. And I learned that on my first day on the campaign about a month ago. Well, if I knew that a month ago, they certainly knew that at that polling in January of 2024. They have known for 8 months that they cannot win any of the swing states that they need in order to win. They can't win them because they needed heavy majorities amongst the Muslim population just to carry those places. And that's why they've gone so heavy on the racial rhetoric and trying to get black numbers up, because they are trying to compensate for the wholesale exodus of Muslims from their voting bloc. And they seem ignorant of the fact that every time you raise every time you talk to the black community, you're also talking to the black Muslim community. And that black Muslim community is not coming along with this genocide no matter what. So that was January 2024. Now, fast forward, right? We saw CARE run a poll early in the process, where a national poll where first Jill and Kamala were polling at 29%, neck and neck. I've been on the campaign for maybe a week when this came out. Then Wisconsin and Arizona, swing states, and a third one that I'm forgetting. Now Jill is running ahead of Kamala. Well, Yakin Institute, good friends of mine, people that I know, I've seen their new polls that have not yet come out. They're going to come out this week. 53% of the Muslims are now going third party, with 80% of them coming to us now, okay? 15% for Kamala, 4% for Trump. Okay, so this narrative that we are taking votes away from the Democrats and giving them to Trump, it is an effort to do 2 things. They're gaslighting us, one, but they're also scapegoating us. They want to blame the Muslims when they lose the election, because they've already lost the election. They cannot win the election. There is no path to victory for the Democrats. The polls that they're giving you, whatever they're telling you, they all know this. And that's the reason why they had Aosi Pelosi come after us, attacking us. That's the reason why they had Kunta Keith Ellison. Literally, the week after he came up to me at Friday prayer on the north side of Minneapolis and wanted to, embrace me man to man, black man to black man, Muslim to Muslim, then he's told by his Democrat handlers that he's got to put out a hit on Jill. So Massa say jump, Keith say how high, boss? How high you want me to jump? And so that's why they're doing it, because they already know that they have no path to victory.
Whoops, I was muted. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Oh my God. So yeah, that is a clip from the interview that I did with Jill Stein and Butch Ware. That interview premiered earlier this afternoon. So when you get a chance, please go check that out. There's so much more that is said there during that discussion that I think people really do need to hear. But that part right there from Butch Ware, I think was shocking to a lot of people when I shared that video on Twitter, but not shocking to Muslim voters. And I think something that Butch Ware said that is very much spot on is that when we talk about the Muslim voting, community, that includes Black Muslims as well. So when the Democratic Party says that, they're trying to increase the Black vote, that also would include Black Muslims as well. Very good interview. Guys, check it out. I'm telling you, there's so much that was said there during that discussion. Just some things that I think people may not be aware of. Because again, when you're seeing these polls on corporate media, you do have to understand they're not showing you these internal polls. So that's the reason why you're seeing a lot of people attack Jill and Butch heavily this time around compared to when Jill ran in 2016. So they're very powerful there, very powerful. We interviewed a member from the Abandon Harris movement on RBN earlier today on Revolutionary Blackout Network. Check that out. And he made it very clear, what their goal is and what their strategy is. And they are not going along with this genocide. They are not going along with Kamala Harris, and they are very vocal about it and not ashamed of it. So this is a unique election this time around, something that a lot of us are not used to. There's a lot of crazy things that have happened this year, but hey, we're here for the ride, right? We are here for the ride, and we will see what will happen, going forward. But always remember that when they show you those polls on corporate media, they're not showing you the internal polls that show the Muslim vote and shows how much support is going towards third parties. So that's important for people to understand. But welcome, guys. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And guys, I ask you to bear with me tonight. It appears I do have a cold. So if I sound kind of stuffy, that is why. That is why. But I'm here for it, fam. I'm here for it. We have quite a bit to discuss tonight. Interesting stories. I think a lot of you know, especially if you live in New York, there was one that broke late last night, which got a lot of people's attention. We're going to cover that as well. And I'm going to tell you what I really think about that whole situation. But first and foremost, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. You patronies, Patronies, that's a new word. Patronies, thank you for your support. I appreciate it. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters, of course. Don't forget about those Sabbies. They're the meat of the sandwich, just, holding the bread together there. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here. And you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you so much. And I want to give a special shout out here to those who are new Sabby patrons. Shout out to Corey Williams and Anthony Fame. Thank you. Thank you so much, Based. I think my patrons have the best names. I really do. I think they got the best names. I don't know. Let's go to some of the comments here, guys. Shout out to Martha Russell for becoming a Sabby member. Let's give Martha a big whoop, whoop. What's up, Trell? I heard that Andrew Cuomo wants that mayor spot. Very interesting. Yeah, we're going to get into that when we get into the Eric Adams story. I don't think Cuomo should be anywhere near any political office ever again. What's up, Angelica? Hey there, Sabby Sabs. I'm with Penny too. Angelica's referring to Janet Jackson there, her character from Good Times. Greetings, Sella. Former Governor Cuomo would be a worse replacement for Mayor Adams if you're seeking social liberation for NYC residents. Well, I would argue that Mayor Adams hasn't been great for social liberation either. He's the one that has militarized the police and sent them in after protesters, not forgetting also about the incident that happened in the subway where police officers are shooting at subway, people trying to take the subway because they didn't want to pay the increase of the fare. So I'm not a fan of Eric Adams, and I'll get into that when we get to the story. Susanna says, yes. Lana, hi, Sabby. Great interview with Dr. Jill and Butch. Thank you. Shout out to the Oracle says, run, Stein, where, run. Greetings, Car Hauler Hustle. Sabby, don't say Eric Adams was indicted. It's just a very serious review taking place. Oh, man. Thank you, Walter. These two are authentic, not voting for murder. Shout out to Cloudness. Kamala Harris, a.k.a. OG Hawk Tua Harris, is a 304. Oh my gosh. I've heard a lot of nicknames for politicians in my life, but I think people have come up with quite a bit for Kamala Harris. It just cracks me up every time. Okie dokie. Let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail, shall we, guys? Shall we? I'll try my best to stay on time tonight. Gonna try me best. Try my best. All right. Tonight, we are discussing Aaron Monte goes off. And yes, he did go off. And I think when we get to that story, I don't think you can blame him. I don't think you can blame him, but he had some things to say during that debate on Piers Morgan's show. Also, not just about the current conflicts in the Middle East, but also about a path forward. And that's the part, I think, from that discussion that needs to be played over and over again, that people really need to hear. How do you move forward? We're also going to discuss, if you have not heard about this yet, holy smokes, the first NYC mayor has been to be indicted is Eric Adams. And I think we saw this coming, right? We're going to get into the charges. They announced the charges earlier this morning. From what I understand, it's a 99-page report. We are not going to go through 99 pages, but I do have a video clip that we're going to analyze for that. We're also going to discuss Dana Bash and Jake Tapper exposed. They should be ashamed of themselves, and I think they need to be fired. I really do think Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, for the blatant lie that they told on CNN, and it's not the first time, I think they should be fired. We'll get to that story. We're also going to discuss Kamala Harris's MSNBC interview. I'm not sure if everyone saw this. It seems like it kind of flew under the radar. Definitely didn't get as much attention as the first interview that she had with Dana Bash, where it was her and Tim Walz. But we're going to talk about the economy conversation during that interview. That's what I want to focus on for that. Last but not least, innocent man executed. That is Marcellus Williams there. If you haven't heard about that story from Missouri, we're going to get into that tonight and talk about the problems that we have with our so-called justice system in this country. And we will also get started discussing the Arizona ballot measures. Arizona. The only thing I know about Arizona is that it's hot. I know it's hot there, and I know Breaking Bad. That's it. That's all I know about Arizona. So looking over these ballot measures, for me, it kind of got me a little bit excited because it tells me a little bit more about these states as I'm looking into those ballot measures. But that is all I know about Arizona. Walter Beasley says, I live in Arizona. Oh, okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with that first story, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, I should say Wednesday, a Missouri man was executed. He was innocent. His name is Marcellus Williams. Marcellus Williams has been in prison for years for apparently a crime that he did not commit. Even the prosecutor tried to reach the governor to tell the governor, listen, he didn't get a fair trial. There's new evidence that shows this was not the guy. You cannot execute this guy. There were a number of people that called the governor's office because that's what you can do to try to get the governor to stop the execution. And the governor can do that, by the way, but it didn't work. So then people tried to escalate it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court denied it. Let's get into this clip here from CNN. This is a travesty with our justice system, but it's not the first time that this has happened. We're going to get into this, and I'm going to tell you what I think should happen moving forward.
Tonight, a Missouri man has been executed by the state, but a deeply unsettling question remains. Was Marcellus Williams innocent? He was accused of killing Felicia Gale in 1998. But a re-examination of evidence raised questions about whether he actually did it. After years of investigations and hearings, Missouri Governor Mike Parsons stepped in this year and ordered the execution to move forward. Now, that was despite prosecutors, Williams's family, and even the family of Gale pleading to spare Williams's life. Now, that did not happen. And tonight, a last-ditch appeal to the Supreme Court was rejected with a 6-3 vote. falling along ideological lines. A devout, practicing Muslim, Williams' last words were, "All praise be to Allah in every situation."
And this is another thing, too. Marcellus Williams was Muslim. I saw his son being interviewed, and his son was just saying, like, please, don't kill my dad. And I've never been one that agreed with the death penalty. Never have, never will, because I don't feel like it's really our role to end someone's life. And if we have a true rehabilitation system, shouldn't prison systems actually rehabilitate the prisoners and not kill people? Do you know how much it costs? Number one, let's talk about the economic factor. Do you know how much it costs to execute someone? We're talking about millions of dollars. It actually is more affordable to keep a prisoner in jail than it is to execute them on death row. But that's besides the point with this particular case, because Marcellus Williams was innocent. Anytime you have the prosecutor coming forward and the prosecutor is saying, wait a minute, this isn't right, we messed up. And regardless if they had all of the new evidence in front of them, the fact that the prosecutor said this man did not receive a fair trial, that in itself should have been enough to stop the execution. There's a lot of people that are pointing fingers at voters because of this. I've seen it on social media, people blaming those that didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and said, this is all your fault because you guys didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. And that's how we ended up with this conservative court. And that's why he was executed. To that, I say this. Number one, blaming the voters is a bad strategy. Bad strategy. Number two, it's interesting how a lot of people are pointing their fingers at the Supreme Court instead of pointing their fingers at the governor, which is the first step. The governor decided to move forward with the execution. And what's crazy is that I would not be surprised if this governor, if he runs for re-election, if he's elected again. I've seen it happen before. But everybody's pointing fingers at the people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 instead of pointing their fingers at the governor of Missouri, who had the power to prevent this. It's been done before, and I'll show you in just a second.
The man's last meal, chicken wings and tater tots. And at 7:01 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, Marcellus Williams was given the lethal injection of the sedative pentobarbital, and 9 minutes later, he was pronounced dead.
At one point, he appeared to wiggle his feet, which were underneath a white sheet that's pulled up to his neck, moved his head slightly. Then I could see his chest heaved about a half dozen times. I didn't see any movement after that.
The death penalty, ladies and gentlemen. Neither family spoke after the execution, but many people in the public did. Nearly 100 people protesting outside of the correctional facility even today. But the governor, through a spokesperson, well, they defended the execution.
No juror nor judge has ever found Williams' innocence claim to be credible. 2 decades of judicial proceedings and more than 15 judicial hearings upheld his guilty conviction. Thus, the order of execution has been carried out.
With me now, St. Louis prosecuting attorney Wesley Bell, who is also running for Congress. Wesley Bell, you and I have spoken in the past when there was a chance that they would stay the execution, a fancy way of saying to continue for time to investigate the possibility that he was in fact innocent. What is your reaction tonight knowing that that did not happen and he is now dead?
Now, I do want to tell you who this guy is, just in case you may have forgotten. This is Wesley Bell. This is the politician that primary challenged primary challenged Cory Bush. He's the one that AIPAC put a lot of money behind him to get Cory Bush out of Congress. That's who this is. So just FYI. Wild, fam.
Justice, the interests of justice were not served. And as a prosecutor, as you know, as a former prosecutor, our job is not to get convictions, it's not to collect stats, it's to bring justice. And for us, for the folks that in my office, Lathrop GPM, Matthew Jacoby, Elena McMullen, Teresa Hurla, my office, the Conviction Incident Review Unit led by Jessica Hathaway. We're talking about folks who invested blood, sweat, and now tears to spare his life because it was the right thing to do. If there's the shadow of a doubt with respect to innocence or the integrity of a conviction, at the very least, that individual should not be executed.
So I want to pause here for a second, and I do want to add something here to credit something that he said there about if there is a shadow of a doubt. That is true. And the fact that there was doubt that was presented, but not just doubt, but the fact that the prosecutor said this guy did not receive a fair trial, that in itself, again, is enough for the governor to stop the execution. 2, let's keep it real. When he said a prosecutor's job is not to get convictions, it's to get justice, that's bullshit. The prosecutor's job is to get a conviction. And the more convictions that prosecutors get, the higher they can move up in their career. That's just a reality. Like, stop that.
It is, to say disappointing would be an understatement. There were several opportunities on the timeline, if you will. Obviously, this case predated me originally. And so there's, 20 plus years ago, but throughout the appellate process and now once we have had an opportunity, there have been opportunities for decisions to be made that should have resulted in Mr. Williams' life being spared, and the system failed. It failed all of us.
You have to wonder why there was such a vested interest in the speed of this. After this was a murder from decades ago at this point in time, now that this was underway, why do you think there was the haste to do so? Given your office said no, the victims' families said no, he was not asking to be released. He wanted time to investigate further and was even willing to plead guilty to lesser charges, which I might add, there were people who said, well, hold on, that must mean that he's probably guilty. What's your response to that?
What he was willing to agree to was called an Alford plea, as you know, which he is not pleading guilty to the charges. He's acknowledging that there's enough evidence to convict him. But that was really for us to be able to buy time to be able to investigate his claims of innocence, because the execution date was set. If the execution date was stayed or just pushed back a few months to give us more time to investigate this matter, we may have been able to determine whether or not he was in fact innocent or not. But as you know, it's not just about innocence. It's also about the integrity of the conviction.
Right.
And there are serious, legitimate concerns about this conviction. And at the very least, he shouldn't be executed. That's what we're asking. This was not a dichotomy between execution or release. This was execution or life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then his team and they would have time to vet his claims of innocence. But now we're looking at a family who had to relive this again. Felicia Gale's family had to relive this all over again. And as the prosecutor, I can't look them in the eye and say the right person was punished because we don't know.
And this is another thing I want to say, too. This does not give justice to the victim's family either. That's another thing. Now, it is not common that these types of situations will be granted, right? Like, it's not as common that a last minute like ditch effort to try to get the governor to say, stop the execution. Most of the time that it doesn't go that way. But from what I understand about Marcellus Williams' particular case, again, anytime the prosecutor was willing to come forward, that does send off alarm bells. And I could say that to anyone. I think that in itself should have sent off a big like, whoa, let's pause the brakes here, right? That, and I don't believe that anybody should have to go through the death penalty. Never agreed with it. Never have, never will. But there was one case in particular that I did cover a couple of years ago where the governor did grant clemency. And that was with this particular gentleman here. His name is Julius Jones. And so if you've been watching me like for a long time, like for those of you who watched me like at least 2 years ago, you may remember me covering this. I was sending out an alarm to people to tell people to call the governor. There were also protests for Julius Jones. I know when I was trying to call the governor, like it was busy. Every time I tried to call was busy, but that was a good sign because that meant that everybody was trying to call. Now, in his particular case, I want to show you the governor of Oklahoma, which was Governor Stitt. He granted clemency to Julius Jones. So this is a time when it actually did work out. Now, Julius Jones isn't free, but Julius Jones was not executed because of the call. So this was an example where the governor did do the right thing. And I want to tell you something else I think that helped Julius Jones as well. NFL quarterback Baker Mayfield, he was another one of the people that wrote a letter to the governor that said, based on the new evidence that I have seen and I've read about, Julius Jones should not be executed and needs to be freed. Now, from what I understand until this day, Julius Jones is not free, but I will continue to check on that particular case. But the thing about Julius Jones, again, like he's been in prison since 1999, and it was just recently the same year that he was supposed to be executed. There were a number of incidents that were brought forward. It was new evidence about his particular case. One of those items said that there was no way that Julius Jones was even at the scene of the crime at that time. And so why is this important, right? Because oftentimes, particularly when it comes to Black males, oftentimes police officers, oftentimes a judge and jury, they will see one Black man and mistake him for another because for some reason they tend to think that all Black people look alike. And this has happened over and over again. There's been a number of times where someone who was a victim or someone who witnessed a crime, they'll say that, oh yeah, it was a Black man. And you can put them in front of a lineup of like 5 or 6 or whatever Black men, and they could easily just point to the wrong person because they tend to think all Black men look alike. And that reminded me of Julius Jones. And I was like, willing to bet. That's what happened with him. That could also be what happened with Marcellus Williams. This is another reason why we need to remove the death penalty. Now, here's something that's really interesting for the people who were on social media and were trying to shame people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and blame them for the reason why people are just ridiculous. This is why sometimes like people get so frustrated with liberals in particular, because people want to go back to 2016 and blame people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton for everything that is wrong today. As if you know for a fact that Hillary Clinton would have made your life so much better. That's what is really disturbing to me. Instead of blaming our justice system, instead of blaming the governor for not granting that, they want to point fingers at us. But I want to show you something that the Democratic Party did that a lot of people are not talking about because they want to keep this hush. And this article was written August 31st, 2024. So this article is pretty recent. The end of the abolition era. Democrats quietly dropped their opposition to the death penalty. How many of you knew this? How many of you knew that the Democratic Party, they quietly dropped their opposition to the death penalty? So this is another example that shows you how the Democratic Party moved further to the right. Look at this. In 2020, Joe Biden pledged that if he was elected president, he would stop federal executions. Everybody remember this? Proposed legislation to abolish the death penalty at the federal level and provide incentives for states to follow suit, because we can't ensure that we get these cases right every time. Biden said this. Biden said it. He said we must eliminate the death penalty. That didn't happen. See, this is another one of those promises that Joe Biden made that I think a lot of people forget about. That year, the party also voiced its opposition to the death penalty in its platform. This year, however, marks a striking contrast. So far, Democrats have been silent about capital punishment. To date, Kamala Harris, its 2024 nominee, has said nothing about capital punishment. Moreover, as an article in the Huffington Post points out, this year the platform marks the first time since 2004 the platform has not mentioned the death penalty. In fact, the only mention of it in this year's DNC was made by 4 members of the so-called exonerated 5. They were convicted of a crime they did not commit in 1989, and they were reminded, the delegates, that Donald Trump had called for their execution. The Democrats' silence about capital punishment does not represent a principled retreat, but rather an understandable strategic calculation. Nonetheless, it is a missed opportunity to advance the abolitionist cause. So, does everybody see what has happened here? So now, again, the Democratic Party, now all of a sudden not speaking out against the death penalty, slowly kind of just quietly walked away from that. And they mentioned Kamala Harris, and I noticed another thing. I didn't see Donald Trump or Kamala Harris say a damn thing about Marcellus Williams. Not one of them. Now, I don't expect Donald Trump to say it, but if Kamala Harris is supposed to be a Democrat, you would think she would give a damn. You would think she would give a damn about this black man who was innocent, who was just executed. And this is the thing that kills me. And this is the thing I've been telling people to pay attention to when it comes to Kamala Harris. The Democratic Party and corporate media keep wanting to say, vote for this black woman running for president. But you never hear this black woman really talk about black issues. You never really hear this so-called black woman, and we didn't went through all of that, but you never really hear her speaking out and fighting for these causes. Anytime she's interviewed and they ask her about the fact that she's struggling with black male voters, when they ask her about reparations, when they ask her about black issues, you can tell how she looks so uncomfortable. But everybody wants you, all these Democrats want you to vote for her because they said, you better not vote against a black woman. Silence. She said nothing, not one damn thing. Why? Remember, she was a prosecutor. She's a part of the system. She's hawkish, or she's vowing to be hawkish on the border, even though she ain't been doing her job with the border this whole time and she was assigned to it. She's vowing to be hawkish with the police. She wants to give more money to the police. She said nothing. And you have all these black commentators like Roland Martin saying, how dare you speak badly about Kamala Harris? You guys better support her. That's a black woman right there. When do you see Kamala Harris supporting the black community? You couldn't even tweet about it. Now, let me show you what AOC did in reference to this conversation. Now, AOC decides to tweet also yesterday, or excuse me, what was yesterday? Tuesday. We must abolish the death penalty. Who are you talking about, AOC? What do you mean? We must abolish the death penalty. AOC couldn't even say his name. Professor Zinkus came in here and said, his name is Marcellus Williams. And you waited till they murdered him to tweet this. Shame. So do you see, does everybody see the game? Like, it just, these random tweets that you just put out there to make it look like you really care or give a damn, they weren't following this. She wasn't paying attention to Marcellus Williams. She didn't really give a damn. She can't even say his name. But the Democratic Party, they want you to believe that they're going to be the best when it comes to criminal justice, when it comes to policing, and when it comes to the black community. What happened to Marcellus Williams, it's horrendous. And it happens more often than people realize. And I think what more people are starting to see, and I'm glad for social media, I think what more people are starting to see is that for once, they're waking up to the fact that, you know what? The Democrats don't care about us either. It's a hot mess, a hot mess. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Courtney Smith. Is that award-winning musician Walter Beasley in the comments? If so, he's a legendary GOAT. I wasn't sure if that was actually him or not, you know, because sometimes people have other people's pictures, like their profile picture or whatever. But good question there. Leroy, that's gross. They're blaming Black voters back during when Hillary lost in order to scare you into voting for Kamala. Nah, fam. That's exactly what they're doing. It's ridiculous. Voter shaming doesn't work, guys. Thank you for the super chat, New York Varsity. Check Kamala's history. Trust me, she does not want to talk about the death penalty. Thank you, Zoe. I saw all over TikTok that they blocked his name from Kamala Harris's comment section. Wow. Richard, hey, Sabs, where was the Congressional Black Caucus on Brother Marcellus' execution? So I have not seen many Democrats say anything about this situation. But they want you to believe that they're going to be the best on criminal justice, right? Silence. What a mess. What a mess. If you're just joining and you haven't done so, don't forget to smash that like button, folks. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we're doing the damn thing and moving on to the next story. Ay. This one's a doozy. You know, every now and then, Jake Tapper may say something on CNN, and I'm like, oh, wow, he actually did something right this time. But then he always takes 3 steps backwards. And it's not just him, it's Dana Bash as well. Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, both of them should be ashamed of theirself for what they did to Rashida Tlaib. And we're going to start with the video from Jake Tapper, because what he does is he basically puts Gretchen Whitmer on the spot to see if he can get her to condemn anti-Semitism. But there's just one problem. The quote that he provides to Gretchen Whitmer that he says is from Rashida Tlaib is not what Rashida Tlaib said. Listen to this.
Your state's Attorney General, Dana Nessel, charged almost a dozen individuals from the University of Michigan over the anti-Israel protests. Among the charges, attempted ethnic intimidation, assaulting or obstructing a police officer, and on and on. These are pro-Palestinian protesters who are being punished and prosecuted. Michigan Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who is Palestinian, she called the charges from Nessel, who is Jewish, shameful. And Tlaib said, quote, "It seems that the Attorney General decided if the issue was Palestine, she was going to treat it differently. And that alone speaks volumes about possible biases within the agency she runs." Unquote.
Okay. Everyone take a moment and look at Rashida Tlaib's quote, right? Now, I don't consider myself to be a fan of Rashida Tlaib because, like I said, she's good on some issues, but she always seems to manage to stick with the party that screws her over in the end. She still sticks with the Democratic Party. So that's a problem that I have with Rashida Tlaib. However, I will say she was the only squad member who did not vote against the railroad workers when they were trying to go on strike, right? Look at her statement. It seems that the Attorney General decided if the issue was Palestine, she was going to treat it differently. And that alone speaks volumes about possible biases within the agency she runs. That is the statement. Listen to this.
Quote, Nessel responded by saying, quote, "Rashida Tlaib should not use my religion to imply I cannot perform my job fairly as Attorney General. It's anti-Semitic and wrong."
Everything is anti-Semitic now. Now, did you find anything anti-Semitic about Rashida Tlaib's statement? No. You see what I mean? So it's gotten to the point now where you can't even disagree. You can't criticize. You can't push back without being called or being labeled as anti-Semitic. This is the Attorney General. This is someone who is in a position of power in Michigan. And for those who don't know what was going on, yes, she is trying to have like pro-Palestinian protesters, giving them criminal charges. She's trying to have these people arrested. It's ridiculous, right? But what I noticed is the quickness for her to label Rashida Tlaib as anti-Semitic, but I don't see anybody else labeling Dana Nessel as Islamophobic. Does everybody see the way that this goes? Why is it nobody's pointing to Dana Nessel and saying that she's Islamophobic because she's targeting pro-Palestinian people and charging them? What a mess.
Unquote. Do you think that Tlaib's suggestion that Nessel's office is biased was anti-Semitic?
Listen, Jake, you know what? All I can say is that I know that our Jewish community is in pain, as is our Palestinian and Muslim and Arab communities in Michigan. I know that seeing the incredible toll that this war has taken on both communities has been really challenging and difficult, and my heart breaks for so many. But as governor, my job is to make sure that both these communities are protected and respected under the law in Michigan, and that's exactly what I'm going to stay focused on.
But do you think Attorney General Nessel is not doing her job? Because Congresswoman Tlaib is suggesting that she shouldn't be prosecuting these individuals that Nessel says broke the law, and that she's only doing it because she's Jewish and the protesters are not.
That was not what she said. Do you see what he just did there? So Jake Tapper slides that in and he says that Rashida Tlaib said that she's only doing this because she's Jew. Do you see what he did?
Quite an accusation. Do you think it's true?
Like I said, Jake, I'm not going to get in the middle of this argument that they're having. I can just say this. We do want to make sure that students are safe on our campuses, and we recognize that every person has the right to make their statement about how they feel about an issue, a right to speak out. And I'm going to use every lever of mine to ensure that both are true.
Okay, so let me show you what they did. So now he shares this statement, Governor Whitmer's statement just now. That was after the interview. The suggestion that Attorney General Nessel would make charging decisions based on her religion as opposed to the rule of law is anti-Semitic. So do you see how they got Gretchen Whitmer to cave? You see how they got her to cave after that interview? Why didn't Gretchen Whitmer say what Nessel is doing to the pro-Palestinian people is Islamophobic? Why didn't she put that in her statement? This is a big problem. This is a big problem. So somebody got a hold of Gretchen Whitmer after this interview and pushed her to side with the Attorney General. Here's a couple of problems. Number one, what Rashida Tlaib said there was not anti-Semitic. Number two, Rashida Tlaib is a Semite. Do people not understand this? I don't know how many times I have to go over this on the show. Palestinians are Semites too, okay? All right? Arabs are Semites too. And that should have been the response. But this is the response that she gave. Attorney General Nessel has always conducted her work with integrity and followed the rule of law. We must all use our platform and voices to call out hateful rhetoric and racist tropes. So now Gretchen Whitmer went from saying both communities are hurting right now, and I don't want to get into between the middle of their feud, to basically telling Rashida Tlaib or saying that Rashida Tlaib had hateful rhetoric and racist tropes. What Jake Tapper did is not only wrong, It's manufacturing consent, and he's been doing it. Him and Dana Bash have been doing this over and over again on CNN since October 7th, telling one side of the story, but not the other. Putting all the blame on the Palestinian people or the pro-Palestinian protesters, but not talking about what Israel is doing. And anytime anyone has been interviewed by Dana Bash and they try to talk about what Israel is doing, she cuts them off and just like, yeah, I know that, but anyway. They're compromised and they are biased. And this is what people consider to be the real news. This guy lied right on CNN. And so does Dana Bash. So Dana comes in to basically back up Jake Tapper. You see how they working together? So she comes in to back him up. Now she starts off with a sad reality. Now, when you look at this woman's face, I want to be very clear here. First of all, Dana Bash has a tendency, and she's the one that's really, really pushing this out of all the commentators on CNN. She has this tendency to try to make people feel as though she's oppressed. Dana Bash is not oppressed. She wants people to think that regardless of what all these people that have been killed, that have died in Gaza or the West Bank and now in Lebanon, she wants you to put that to the side. And she wants you to focus on what's happening to the Israeli people, even though Israel is in power. And she wants you to seriously look at her and see someone who's oppressed. Get out of here. Listen to her. So she comes in to back him up.
And now to a sad reality, and that is anti-Semitism is everywhere. And it comes from both ends of the political spectrum. But politicians sometimes sidestep calling it out when it comes from a member of their own party. We saw two examples on State of the Union yesterday. First, with Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, when my co-anchor Jake Tapper asked about a Democratic Congresswoman's accusation that the state's Jewish Attorney General was letting her religion influence her job.
So first thing I noticed when she started saying this, all of a sudden she doesn't know Rashida Tlaib's name. She says a Democratic Congresswoman. All of a sudden you don't know who Rashida Tlaib is anymore. No, that's not an accident. That's on purpose. That's erasure. It's not like Dana Bash has never spoken to Rashida Tlaib. She has. So now all of a sudden, she just doesn't know Rashida Tlaib's name? Am I alone on this? If I don't say her name, then, it'll just go away if I don't say her name. So she goes on, and we'll just scoot ahead here. She goes on to show the same clip that I just showed you. And she also shows this part here from Jake Tapper when he's talking to, hold on.
With Republican Senator Tom Cotton.
Are you comfortable with that? With Donald Trump saying if he loses preemptively, it's the fault of the Jews, a group already experiencing a rise of anti-Semitism in this country from the left and the right, but still preemptively, it's the fault of the Jews?
Well, Jake, Donald Trump has been saying things like this for at least 11 months since the October 7th attack.
I've never heard you say anything like that. If we lose, it will be the fault of the Jews.
But Jake, Donald Trump, again, has been saying for months that anyone who cares about Israel, anyone who cares about the fate of the U.S.-Israel alliance should vote for him.
I'm talking about Jewish voters who vote for any number of reasons on any number of issues.
And he was at an event talking about combating anti-Semitism here and around the world.
Just yes or no. Are you comfortable with him using that language?
Jake, it's the same kind of language he's been using for months.
That doesn't mean it's okay.
Yes, but it's his point. Jake, he's the most pro-Israel president we've ever had.
Now, Jake.
So do you see what Dana Bash is doing there? She's trying to build a case. So she's trying to show you, she's like, look, we have Democrat politicians and Republican politicians doing the same thing. That's to invoke empathy and sympathy, to make you feel bad. Now listen to this.
Asked that question over and over again. Senator Cotton never answered. Now, Cotton has spoken out when it appears to come from the political left. He actually tweeted, "There's no place for anti-Semitism in America," when Jake posted about people harassing yours truly at a book event. CNN's David Chalian is back with me. I was great.
Let me pause for a second. She's talking about the book event that she hosted, and there were people that protested against her, asking her, why is she lying about what Israel is doing? And she said those people were anti-Semitic. Do you see what I mean? You can't ask them any questions. You can't criticize. You can't point out things that they're doing that is just blatantly wrong, or you're going to get that label. Does anybody see a problem here? It kind of reminds me of McCarthyism. That's what it seems like, McCarthyism. So listen to this part here, and then I'm going to show you how they tried to retract this.
Grateful for that, as anybody who is the subject and the victim of anti-Semitism, hate, or any other hate. And the key is, which we have learned the hard way, is you've got to call it out no matter where it comes from. What does it tell you about the inability or unwillingness to do so when it comes from a prominent person in your own party?
Now, Dana is telling you that you got to call it out when you see it, no matter where it comes from. But Dana doesn't call it out when it's done to the Palestinian people. Dana doesn't call it out. Dana doesn't call out any of the actions that Israel has done to the Palestinian people, to the Lebanese people. She doesn't call any of these things out. In fact, she tried to find a way to make excuse for it, or she'll try to escalate or elevate that 1,200 number from October 7th and make you see that that is more important than the hundreds of thousands of people that have been killed in Gaza. So she doesn't even practice her own rhetoric here. What a mess.
Your word. It's not an inability, it's unwillingness. And it's because you're putting politics ahead of principle and morality. And that's what both of them did there. It's not very hard to say that Rashida Tlaib saying that Dana Nessel is pursuing charges because she's Jewish is an anti-Semitic thing to say. It is. It is not.
That is not what Rashida Tlaib said.
Not hard to say that Donald Trump should not be pointing fingers at the Jewish people if he loses this election. First of all, the math of that just doesn't make sense either, because, in an election this close, you can finger point any single group you want. None of it is going to be correct. It's going to be a whole different sort of composition of the electorate that is going to affect the outcome of it. So it's pretty easy to call out. Obviously, they didn't want to take on their own party at this. Fareed Zakaria interviewed Hillary Clinton this weekend, and they had a fascinating exchange about Hillary Clinton's perception about those campus protests when she was teaching at Columbia last year in the aftermath of October 7th. She had no problem calling it out, even though some of those young supporters may have been Democrats in their political ideology, calling that out as something other than critiquing the Israeli government as what it was, which was, some anti-Semitism coursing through that. So you got.
So let's move on here, because this one really rubbed me the wrong way. Really rubbed me the wrong way. And even The Intercept, they pointed this out, this article here from Natasha Leonard. CNN anchors won't stop lying about something Rashida Tlaib never said. I mean, it's appalling. It's disgusting. And it goes on to say here, I want to get to this part here. Anyone watching CNN's State of the Union with Tapper on Sunday or Inside Politics with Dana Bash on Monday would have heard that Tlaib questioned Michigan Attorney General's Dana Nessel's ability to fairly do her job because Nessel is Jewish. Little matter to the primetime journalist that Tlaib's recent criticism of Nessel did not in any way mention or refer to the Attorney General's Jewish faith or identity. They're running with this. They're running with this. And it goes on to tell you where the lie comes from. It stems from Tlaib's comments on Nessel's decision to prosecute 11 Gaza Solidarity protesters from the University of Michigan. The student demonstrators are facing overreaching criminal charges for camping out on their own college campus to protest the funding of Israel's genocidal war. And Rashida Tlaib went on to say, we have the right to dissent. We have the right to protest. Like, they must have gotten a lot of backlash, because Dana Bash came back the next day and issued this statement. And I want you to hear the statement that she made here, because at the end, she still tries to be a smartass. But listen to this.
A clarification on a story we brought you yesterday concerning Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib's comments attacking a decision by Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel to bring charges against pro-Palestinian protesters at the University of Michigan. Tlaib accused Nessel of, quote, biases. Here's Tlaib's full quote to the Detroit Metro Times. It seems that the Attorney General decided if the issue was Palestine, she was going to treat it differently. And that alone speaks volumes about possible biases within the agency she runs. Now, Tlaib did not reference Nessel's Jewish identity. Her office has not responded to our request for clarity. Her allies insist that's not what she meant. But Nessel still says she believes it is anti-Semitic and repeated on CNN yesterday that, quote, clearly, she's referencing my religion. That clarification.
Do you see what she did there? So again, at the beginning, she said it's a what?
Clarification on a story we brought you yesterday concerning Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib's comments attacking a decision by Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel to bring.
She said it was a clarification. No, it's not a clarification. Dana Bash and Jake Tapper lied. That was an outright lie. And her way of apologizing is, oh, I just want a clarification from yesterday's story. They knew exactly what they were doing. You got to realize who these people are. They're working on behalf of the State Department. The State Department is on the side of Israel. They are always going to be on that side. And so the reality is, even towards the end of this so-called clarification that she had, she made a point to say, however, Attorney General Nessel says that she believes the statement is anti-Semitic. She had to just slide that in there at the very end because she wanted you to be left with that thought in your mind. Does everybody understand how they do this? Instead of ending with, we had the clarification and Rashida Tlaib said, this is the statement that she made. So we're going to go ahead and retract what we said yesterday. Our apologies. Instead of ending with that, she ends with Attorney General Nessel said she still believes it's anti-Semitic. And you know why she did that? Because people usually remember the last thing that was said. People usually remember the last thing you say. So she wanted the viewers to remember that. Yes, EMK says, repeat the lie, repeat the lie. There you go. That's what she wanted to happen. These people are ashamed of themselves. They should be ashamed of themselves, but there obviously must have been a lot of pushback for them to come back the next day and issue even this clarification. I put out something on Twitter and I said, let's get it trending. I didn't think it was going to really do much, but I did go on Twitter and I did say, let's see if I can pull up here. I did say, fire Dana Bash. I did. In fact, we can go to it now. I'll pull it up here because I was curious to see. I'm like, let's see if we can get this trending here. 1 second. Sorry, I got Eric Adams. We got Nico. It goes a minute back, but I put it here somewhere. Welcome to a live stream with Sabby Sabs, where I look for something. Here it is. Here it is. I said, fire Dana Bash. Let's get it trending. Hashtag fire Dana Bash. It got over 8,000 likes. So has Dana been fired? No, but I figured it was worth a shot. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of the deception. And then you know what's interesting too? Something else I want to show you about this Attorney General. This is the part that kills me because you're the Attorney General of Michigan. And someone made this and I thought this was spot on. Attorney General Nessel, prosecuting politicians who poison Flint's water? Nah, no. Prosecuting students peacefully protesting a genocide? There you go. This is where they're at. This is where she's at. You know what I mean? Instead of trying to prosecute people who poison, since we want to bring up hate here, instead of trying to prosecute the former governor and other people who poison predominantly Black people in Flint, Michigan. No, you don't want to focus on that. You want to focus on people who are peacefully protesting against the genocide. Now, you tell me that there's justice in this so-called justice system. I don't think there is. Let's go to some of the comments here. All right. And then, yeah, for those of you just joining, if I sound stuffy, I do have a cold. So sorry, guys. And some of you might be like, why does she sound so froggy? Sorry about that. Randy, love you, Sabby. Been watching you for 2 years now. Thanks so much for your takes. Thank you and welcome. Thank you, Hobbs. Hunter Biden is worried no one will buy his art and also that he will run out of flask and baking soda. That's random, bud. That's random, bud. Thank you, Sparky. Great work, Sabby. You're the bestest girl ever. Thank you. The Oracle says what Tapper did was unethical. Yeah, total smear job, man. Thank you, Sparky. Tom Cotton is a warmongering psychopath. Thanks, Marvin. Truth, questions, challenge, narrative equals anti-Semitic. There you go. Mouse, Prince watching this from beyond going, damn, Sabby, that's a serious dope top. Oh, the purple one. Listen, you must know this, Mouse. I'm a huge Prince fan. Huge Prince. Yeah, I saw Prince live. That was about 13 years ago. I saw Prince live. Thank you, Sparky. Make Israel Syria again. In those Ottoman Empire days, Levant Jews got along fine with their neighbors, whether Muslim, Christian, or otherwise. Thanks, Avenge. Always playing victim while victimizing. There you go. Thanks, Lawn Guy. As a Jew, Dana bashed and Tapper Israel make me so ashamed. I'm sorry, Lawn Guy. Thanks, Sword of Truth. If you tell a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. There you go. Thanks, Jasmine. Dana Bash needs to have her degree rescinded and should never be allowed to be a journalist again. And thank you for this one, Jasmine. I see Nessel and Whitmer have something in common. Ooh, poisoning Black folks and covering it up. That's a good one, Jasmine. And thank you, David. Free Palestine and reparations for Black FBA. Thank you so much. All right. If you're new, don't forget to smash that like button, guys. Thank you very much. All right. And we're moving on to our next story here. Well, it was a crazy night last night in New York City, but I imagine that Eric Adams knew that this day was coming. Last night, Eric Adams was indicted, and this morning they listed at least most of the charges from the federal grand jury, and I think people need to hear this. Now, first and foremost, I want you to hear the speech that he gave, or a little short speech that he gave about his indictment. Everybody's got to hear this again. He knew that this was coming, so I'm sure he was already prepared for this. And I'm going to tell you what I think Eric Adams needs to be, more concerned about. Like, I'm not shocked by this because I told you last year they were investigating Eric Adams and they took his phone. So he knew that it was only a matter of time that they were going to come for him. Listen to this.
My fellow New Yorkers, it is now my belief that the federal government intends to charge me with crimes. If so, these charges will be entirely false, based on lies. But they would not be surprising. I always knew that if I stood my ground for all of you, that I would be a target, and a target I became. For months, leaks and rumors have been aimed at me in an attempt to undermine my credibility and paint me as guilty. Just this past week, they searched the home of our new police commissioner, looking for documents from 20 years ago, just 1 week after he joined my administration. Enough. I will fight these injustices with every ounce of my strength and my spirit. If I'm charged, I know I am innocent. I will request an immediate trials so the New Yorkers can hear the truth. New Yorkers know my story. They know where I come from. I have been fighting injustice my entire life. That fight has continued as your mayor. Despite our pleas, when the federal government did nothing as its broken immigration policies overloaded our shelter system with no relief, I put the people of New York before party and politics.
So let's go ahead and pause here, because many are saying that the reason why he was investigated to begin with is because he started to criticize the Biden administration, and in particular about the migrant crisis. One of the things that Eric Adams did is that he came forward publicly, not just contacting Joe Biden privately, but came forward publicly in the media and said that he has contacted the Biden administration multiple times for help with the migrant situation in New York City. Now, this is after he had made arrangements to give migrants debit cards and to put them into hotels for shelter in New York City and other things as well. And he was like, listen, we're tapped out of resources. We really need some help here. We really need you to come in and do something. And he wasn't alone. My governor, Governor Healy of Massachusetts, contacted the Biden administration. Governor Mayor Wu of Boston contacted the Biden administration, and no response for help. So what's interesting is that people are saying they're only going after him because he spoke out against the migrant situation and said, we need help. They didn't go after Mayor Wu, and they didn't go after Governor Healy. They came after you. Now, I'm pretty sure him speaking out about the Biden administration probably did not help him. Him speaking out against his own party. I told you it's a cult. But I also think that Eric Adams has some corruption going on. So that didn't help him. And it could have been that they knew Eric Adams had corruption going on, but it was something that they were willing to overlook because he was being a team player. But the moment you decide not to be a team player, they're going to come for you. And today they started to list off the charges. And I want you to hear the charges. Some of them include bribery, of course, corruption. I mean, they're saying that he is or refused to register as a foreign agent. Now, we've heard that before, right? That was the same accusation that was against the Huru 3 with Amalia Shatella. But they're saying that they have evidence, they have proof that shows that Eric Adams also was using New York City taxpayer money. So let's dive into it. And I want you guys to think outside the box, because sometimes it's not one way or the other. Sometimes it's not black and white. And sometimes two things can be true at the same time. So it could be true that Eric Adams is being targeted because he spoke out against his own party and he's not being a team player anymore. And he criticized the migrant situation. But it could also be true that Eric Adams was corrupt. Let's get into it.
Mayor Eric Adams has just been indicted on federal criminal charges. The FBI searching the mayor's residence at Grace Mansion in Manhattan just this morning. Adams will be the first sitting New York mayor ever to face federal charges. NBC News correspondent Rahema Alice is in Lower Manhattan. She just got her hands on this unsealed indictment. Also with us, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Former federal prosecutor Christy Greenberg is also here, who worked for the office investigating Adams. So Rahema, start us off. As we mentioned, this was just unsealed. I know you are still processing it and trying to get the details, but walk us through what we know right now and the search that happened just this morning.
Yeah, it's historic, as you mentioned, Anna. Eric Adams is the 110th mayor of New York City, but as you point out, he is the first mayor of New York City ever to be criminally indicted on federal charges. I'm going to read some of it right now to you. It says, in 2014, Eric Adams, the defendant, became Brooklyn Borough president. Thereafter, nearly a decade, Adams sought and accepted improper valuable benefits, such as luxury international travel, including from wealthy foreign business people, and at least least one Turkish government official seeking to gain influence over him. By 2018, Adams, who had by then made known his plans to run for mayor of New York City, not only accepted but sought illegal campaign contributions.
Pause. So some of these things that they're mentioning about the travel, like the Turkish travel, some of these things happened before he was mayor of New York City. And again, like I said, it's one of those things where as long as you're playing ball, Democrat leadership will overlook some of these things, or maybe they'll even cover for you and protect you. You know, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But once you turn your cheek, ow, once you turn your cheek, then they're coming after you.
To his 2021 mayoral campaign, as well as other things of value from foreign nationals. As Adams' prominence and power grew, his foreign national benefactors sought to cash in on their corrupt relationships with him, particularly when, in 2021, it became clear that Adams would become the New York City's mayor. Adams agreed, providing favorable treatment in exchange for the illicit benefits he received. It goes on to talk about after the inauguration, he began preparing for his next election, including by planning to solicit more illegal contributions and granting requests from those who supported his 2021 mayoral campaign with such donations. We should mention to you that I'm standing in Federal Plaza, and about a half an hour now, around the corner, we're expecting that the U.S. District Attorney, Damian Williams, is going to hold a news conference, and he had put out just a moment ago, they're going to talk about these charges. Interestingly, in that press conference, in the press release, he did not name Mayor Adams specifically, but it was clear that Mayor Adams was the target of this investigation as things have been swirling around him. You mentioned and showed some video that earlier this morning, federal authorities went to the mayor's official residence, Gracie Mansion. It is north of from where I'm standing, and they took out material from his home. His attorney sent out a statement at that point, and we should share it with you. His lawyer said federal agents appeared this morning at Gracie Mansion in an effort to create, quote, a spectacle again and take Mayor Adams' phone again. He has been arrested. He has not been arrested and looks forward to his day in court. They sent a dozen agents to pick up a phone when we would have happily turned it in. The mayor has insisted that he is innocent of any and all charges that might come against him. And it's interesting, though, because his administration has been bombarded with scandal, if you will, and allegations of illegal activity, in as much as an investigation has been going on now almost from the time he became mayor in 2021. The charges stem from a broad corruption investigation, and they even examined, now we have the indictment says, the mayor and his campaign conspired with the Turkish government to receive illegal foreign donations. As you know, it is against the law for foreigners to participate by giving money in an American political election.
Pause. Receiving foreign donations during his election. You know what's funny? All this time, they spent time trying to say that that was Jill Stein, that she was taking money for Russia and all that kind of thing. And it turns out, nah. There was an investigation about that, but it turns out, looks like it was one of your own, Dems. Looks like it was one of your own, Hillary Clinton. Yeah, one of your own. In fact, she may have been the one to blow the whistle. Or maybe Diddy. Because don't you all find it a little bit strange that Eric Adams gave Diddy the key to the city, and then Diddy was arrested and indicted by the federal grand jury of New York? And now Eric Adams is now indicted? Somebody's singing. I don't know if it was Hillary. Maybe it was Hillary and Diddy. You don't know. I got some more news on the Diddy front tomorrow, though, by the way, because it appears he might actually appear in trial, or wants to appear in trial. So I got some more news about that. But all I'm saying is all these people ran together. It's not like Eric Adams didn't know who Hillary Clinton was. It's not like Eric Adams didn't know who Diddy was. And Diddy knew who both of them were. So you can put all these things together. All these things together.
It also examined whether or not the mayor pressured New York City Fire Department officials in order to sign off on a new high-rise office building for the Turkish consulate, despite the concerns about safety problems. And last year, it should be mentioned that one of the mayor's campaign fundraiser officials, Brianna Shuggs, her home was searched and her phone and electronic equipment was taken from her home. The mayor was even stopped in the street, his vehicle, and federal agents entered the vehicle taking his phone and electronic equipment. The home of the mayor's director for international affairs was also searched. The search also involved the mayor's former liaison to the Turkish community of former Turkish Airlines executives. There had been talk that the mayor had gotten an upgrade on his seats, if you will, on airline flights to Turkey. He had gone to Turkey several times. He said it was always on official business. Again, the mayor has repeatedly said, as he heard these charges were about to come down, last night he heard about them, and he released a statement saying that he is innocent of any and all potential charges that would be leveled against him, and he is eager to have his day in court. Anna?
Rahima, please keep looking at this indictment. Come back to us momentarily.
You know what else is interesting about this particular situation is that, yes, he's the first New York City mayor to be indicted, but guess who may try to take his place? That is Andrew Cuomo. So you're talking about removing one corrupt official and inserting another corrupt official. And Andrew Cuomo doesn't need to get back into politics at all. He needs to stay as far away from politics as possible. The fact that this guy is even entertaining this is appalling to me. But Eric Adams' day was coming, fam. His day was coming. And so I'm going to tell you why I don't feel sorry for Eric Adams. We're going to get to that when I show you this next clip, because there were protesters outside screaming at him. Black protesters screaming at him, basically letting him know, you didn't look out for us. You didn't look out for us. And Eric Adams, you rubbed elbows with all the right people that would help you and further your career. Eric Adams put more energy and spent more time standing up for Israel than he did for his Black constituents, okay? Eric Adams spent more time standing up for Israel than he did his own community. And that cannot be said enough. Eric Adams was the one who militarized the police and sicked them in on the protesters. The NYCD police officers dragging kids on the street, pulling kids by their hair. That was Eric Adams who sent them in. It was also Eric Adams who lied to corporate media and said that the kids, the protesters, brought in illegal bike chains, only to find out those bike chains were sold right at the Columbia University campus store. Eric Adams has been heavily against the protesters since day one, and he sent in militarized police to threaten those kids and to crack their heads open. That was all Eric Adams. Eric Adams was applauding the NYPD for killing the subway fare hoppers. Eric Adams was the one who tried to over-police New York City by having NYPD officers even just hanging out in the subway, putting them everywhere. Eric Adams wanted his residents to live under a police state. Eric Adams, when he was approached and questioned about the prison conditions at Rikers, said he had no problem with the prison condition at Rikers. Eric Adams has always stood on the side of the police because he was a cop. And the fact that people voted for Eric Adams, I never understood that. Why did y'all want to put a cop in office? All those people that were running for mayor of New York City, and Eric Adams was the one they chose. And so many people said, oh, he's Black. He's going to help out the Black people. How many times do we have to see this? How many times do we have to see that Black faces in high places don't mean that they're going to look out for Black people? Oftentimes, a lot of these politicians look out for their own interests, and Eric Adams was the same. So I don't feel sorry for you, Eric.
with new information as you have a chance to really soak in what we're learning. I do want to note there are 5 counts in this 50-plus page indictment. Count 1, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, federal program bribery, and to receive campaign contributions by foreign nationals. Count 2, wire fraud. Count 3, solicitation of a contribution by a foreign national. Count 4, solicitation of a contribution by a foreign national. And count 5, bribery. So, Lisa Rubin, these are extensive charges, and it looks like all connected to illegal campaign contributions for the mayor by the Turkish government in exchange for things like luxury travel.
Right. And I would say, actually, Anna, there are some here that deal with campaign contributions, and then there are other aspects of it, the bribery scheme, that seems more like a pay-for-play scheme. In other words, we will give you free luxury travel in exchange for you doing additional benefits for us as representatives of the Turkish government or Turkish business interests. Those trips are detailed on a particular page of this indictment, page 41. There's a chart detailing what prosecutors believe are the trips that Eric Adams and his domestic partner accepted and the alleged value of those trips. But I want to point out one other sort of glaringly obvious thing, but maybe not so obvious to our viewers, which is that this is a 57-page indictment against a single person, Eric Adams. There are no other defendants here, and yet there are lots of other people who are detailed and strewn throughout this indictment, named not by their actual names, but by descriptions. There's a person described as the promoter. There's the Adams staffer. There's businessman 1, 2, and 3. These are people who, if not known to the general public, are certainly known to prosecutors and, more importantly, known to the people who represent them. These are people who are now in the crosshairs of this investigation because what is the first of those 5 counts that you just detailed? It's a conspiracy count. It's a conspiracy to commit the rest of the substantive counts: wire fraud, bribery, and solicitation of unlawful campaign contributions. So there are a lot of people who understood that perhaps they were under investigation, who are not yet in the clear, and whose lawyers are probably on speed dial to them right now discussing what they should do in response to this single person indictment, not dissimilar from the Sean Puffy Combs indictment that you and I were just discussing last week, where he too is the only defendant.
Christy.
And I want to say this as well. Something else to think about here. Eric Adams isn't alone. He's not the only politician that's corrupt or that has corruption going on. He's just the one that they decided to go after. And I want us to all fully understand that he's not alone. He just decided, not to be a team player anymore when it came to the migrant situation. And so they decided to go after him. Some of these charges that they're listing off, I'm pretty sure there were people higher up that already knew about it, but they covered it for Eric Adams. These type of things happen all the time. So don't think that he's the only one out there that's doing some shady things. He's not. He's just the one that they decided to go after. And the community not really trying to have it. And I want to show you something here. Notice here, he was trying to give a speech here, but I want you to hear what the protesters are chanting in just a second. I want you to pay attention to who is standing behind Eric Adams, because I think you're going to see a generational divide. The people who are standing behind Eric Adams, these are the people that have his back. These aren't the protesters. So listen to this.
This is not a black day. This is not a black day. This is a youth day. This is a youth day, Eric Adams. This is not a black day. Your policies are anti-black. You are a disgrace to all black people in this city. The things that you have done are unconscionable. You hurt our schools.
So the protester that has the megaphone, he is saying this is not a black thing. So what he's saying is that you're not being targeted because you're black. And he goes on to talk about how Eric Adams' policies actually hurt the black communities. So we'll say it again.
This is not a black day. This is not a black day. This is a youth day. This is a youth day, Eric Adams. This is not a black day. Your policies are anti-black. You are a disgrace to all black people are with us. And this is not a black day. This is a justice day.
First of all, I want to thank you.
Yeah. So I want to point out something that he said there. He said, your policies hurt the black community. And some of the things that he mentioned, he said, you hurt our schools. Remember, Eric Adams was the one that decided to cut funding from education. He said, our streets are dirty. Remember, Eric Adams was the one that decided to cut funding from sanitation. Out of all the cities in the world, I don't think you need to cut sanitation from New York City. Let's just keep it real. And I lived in New York. That is not one where you want to, sanitation. I mean, we're talking about the trash. We're talking about trash, picking up trash off the street. So you don't want that. Eric Adams did that. Eric Adams was the one that decided that he was going to give debit cards to migrants that came into the city, that he put them up into the hotels. And from what I understand, that was supposed to be like a temporary solution. But New Yorkers were saying that some of the migrants, they had debit cards, that their debit cards had more money on it than what they were getting for SNAP benefits. So there was conflict there. So again, there was tension there with the residents. And they felt like Eric Adams was doing more for a migrant community than he was for them. So again, as I said before, this is what happens when you have corporate interests and corporations decide to pit the working class against each other. So you have people in the black community that were angered with people with the migrants that were coming in, and vice versa. So the reality is, Eric Adams did make budget cuts in places in New York City where I feel like should not have been made. Number one, I'm getting tired of people making cuts to education. And as someone that worked in higher ed for years, these kids need resources in those schools. And I got really tired of that. Whether it's the music program, whether it's the art program, you're taking resources away from schools that barely have enough resources for those kids to be successful in the first place. I have a problem with that. We already talked about sanitation. We all know how New York can smell in the summertime when people ain't picking up no damn trash. And I saw it myself when I was there for my birthday. I went to visit for my birthday in March. I noticed they weren't picking up the trash. Now, he said he was hiring someone called the rat czar. How you going to fix the rat problem if you're not picking up the trash? These are things that are common sense. But look who's standing behind him. And this is something I've noticed, guys. It's older black people, for the most part, that are standing behind him, that have his back. We are seeing a generational divide, and this is something I'll continue to express on this show in particular, is that a lot of us younger black people, we not really trying to, we're not feeling this, bruh. We're not. And we're more likely to, by younger, I guess I'll say those of us under 50, right? When the year Sailor Goon said them rats pay rent. Oh my God. We're more likely to be more vocal about the system. We're more likely to, call out our politicians. We're more like, we don't care. And what it seems like what I've noticed is like a lot of like older, particularly older black voters, it almost kind of feels like because they already had their fight, they seem to be comfortable with what they have and don't seem to be willing to fight back against the system. And that's just something I noticed. And it's not everyone. It's not every, black person over 50 years old or anything like that. It's not everyone. But it does seem like they tend to, for the most part, tend to be the ones to say, this is how it is. Just go with it. Things were so much harder back in my day. Yeah. And I get that. And I understand that. But just because things were so much harder back in your day and you feel like things are better for you now, that doesn't mean that we still shouldn't fight back against the system especially when it comes to the systemic issues of racism, for example. That doesn't mean we shouldn't fight back against the system, especially when one of our own is in office and they're corrupt. So I was never, warm and fuzzy about Eric Adams because, again, at the end of the day, he's a cop. I told you guys how I feel about cops. At the end of the day, he's still a cop. I don't care. You're a retired cop. You're still a cop. And even though he wasn't active duty cop, once he became mayor, what did he do? Put more cops on the street. Put more cops on the street. Let's arrest the homeless people and put them into mental institutions. That was Eric Adams too. Oh, what are you doing? Eric Adams also agreed with stop and frisk. And when I sit up there and I see a black politician and everybody's thinking that he's going to try to help the black community, Eric Adams was willing to do more for Israeli New Yorkers than he was for the black community. It was plain as day. So what we need to fight for Eric for? Eric didn't fight for us. I love this by Dr. Victoria Dooley. She said it best. I can't play the music because copyright, but Dr. Victoria Dooley said, walking into Eric Adams' indictment, watch party like this. You guys got to see this. This is funny. Oh, no. Oh, man. That was a good one. Sorry. No, it's just, oh my gosh. We can go to part 2 for the type V and C, Eric. It's a mess. But you know what? They coming after everybody. What'd I tell you? Cat Williams said, what did he say? All lies will be exposed. So like I said, don't think that Eric Adams is the only one. He's not. He's just the one that they decided to go after. Always something to keep into consideration. Let's go to the comments here. Caesar said Diddy singing LMAO. I'm telling you, it could be Diddy like talking to him like, look, let me tell you who was at these damn parties. Was Eric at one of those parties? We don't know. Zoe said he did what with my money? Yeah, and New Yorkers, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about him trying to use your tax dollars? It's a mess. Danny, Eric Blue Lives Matter membership must have expired. Yeah. Brenda says Sabby doing the truth telling and holding the tension of the opposites. Yes, sometimes it really is a mixed bag. Highberry says, please correct me. Did this mayor give Diddy the key to New York? Yeah, he did. Wait till you hear it. Wait till we cover the story tomorrow with Suge Knight. Because that one is going to be Suge Knight's in jail, but he's still making phone calls. So he's still calling the TV shows. We'll get into that. Aunt Shawnee says, remember who was standing on that stage with Eric Adams the night he won the election? They pushed Eric's family to the back and stood in front of his family. Ooh, I need to go back and watch that video. Thank you, Chris. Eric forgot what side his bread was buttered on. Step out of line and that's your ass. Yep. Thank you, David. Sabby, why don't they ever talk about disabled issues that affect Black and Brown communities? I'm disabled. It's not fair, Sabby. Lawrence, Massachusetts in here. Yeah. So my comrade JB from Revolutionary Blackout Network has brought this up multiple times. I mean, like we've done like disability summits and stuff like that on RBN, but he's also, a member of the disabled community. And he's also said the same thing. It's always about the middle class. And you're going to hear that when we get to the next story. It's all about the middle class. They don't talk about people who are poor. They don't talk about people who, and by the way, who is still middle class? I'm trying to figure that out, but I hear you. Shout out to Love for becoming a new member. Do you love to love? Give Love a big whoop whoop. Shout out to Blueser for gifting 50. Holy smokes, you gifted 50 Sabby memberships, Blueser. Well, shout out to Blueser and congrats to whoever got those. I can't see who got them, but thank you, Trusting Success. When will we see politicians go down for receiving foreign bribes from Israel? In the report, I believe one of the countries they mentioned for Eric Adams was Israel, but most of it seemed to be focused on Turkey. Oh, because Israel doesn't have to register as a foreign agent. Turkey is a part of NATO, so they are our ally. Israel isn't. That's a good point too, Trusting Success. Thank you, David. NYC is going to be more rats than people soon enough. I've always wondered about that, you know? Thank you, Cosmos. Agree with you 100%. Thanks. You are welcome. What's up, Sparky Spark? If you don't play ball, they give you 5 years. If you've played ball before, but stop playing ball, they give you 40 years. Woo! Thank you, David. Videos out on NYC protests against Netanyahu. Yeah, Netanyahu is at the UN. I think I'll be able to cover that tomorrow, or he's supposed to be appearing to the UN, which is crazy that they would even let him come there. But I did see some of the protests, so I might be able to cover that tomorrow. Okay. Like the stream, fam, if you haven't done so. Let's see if we can get to 1,000 likes. Like the stream, like the stream. We're gonna do the Kokomo. All right, we are going on to our next story. Kamala Harris had another interview, and this one did kind of fly under the radar. I don't know why, but there wasn't as much attention given to this. There's a couple of moments during this interview I do want to focus on, and that has to deal with the economy, because, you know, we've been talking about these groceries and this money and all this jazz. So I will say this. The woman who interviewed her on MSNBC, I do feel like she did push back a little bit more. Not as much as I would have wanted her to, but I will also fair warn you, because I saw the entire interview. It's roughly about 30 minutes, I believe. There was no discussion about foreign policy. So I don't know if the interviewer just didn't want to discuss that, or if she was told that Kamala was not going to have that conversation. Pretty interesting. Let's get into this part here about the economy. And she's by herself. She's not with Tim Waltz.
Over the last 4 years, there have been tremendous economic wins, and you've just laid out a big plan. But still, polling shows that most likely voters still think Donald Trump is better to handle the economy. Why do you think that is?
Well, here's what I know in terms of the facts. Donald Trump left us with the worst economy.
Employment was so high because we shut down the government, we shut down the country.
Even before the pandemic, he lost manufacturing jobs by most people's estimates, at least 200,000. He lost manufacturing plants. Ask the auto workers how he lost auto plants. We have grown over 20 new auto plants. He has an agenda. Let's just deal with it right now going forward, not to mention what happened in the past. He has an agenda that would include making it more difficult for workers to earn overtime, an agenda that would include cutting off access to small business loans for small businesses, an agenda that includes tariffs to the point that the average working person will spend 20% more on everyday necessities and an estimated $4,000 more a year on those everyday necessities, to the point that top economists in our country, from Nobel laureates to people at Moody's and Goldman Sachs, have compared my plan with his and said my plan would grow the economy, his would shrink the economy.
Pause. So we're about halfway into her answer, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, but she didn't answer the question. She's kind of like, the question was, why do you think that voters still feel more comfortable with the economy under Donald Trump compared to, you know, the Biden administration, or actually what would be just Kamala going forward if she were to win? She didn't answer the question. Now, she is talking a little bit about, like, you know, what she wants to do, etc. But I think it is important that you do answer that. But I think if she answers that, it kind of takes off the mask that The Biden administration has not been 100% truthful about this economy and about their role in it. Tomorrow, I'm going to go over the Black unemployment rate, which Kamala Harris, again, everybody's like Black woman or whatever, is not talking about. And the reason why she's not talking about it, because if she does talk about it, then that means that they've been lying to you about that jobs report, which was already outed on CNN, by the way. They mentioned it during the DNC. They said that the job report numbers were incorrect. They said that basically the Biden administration was cooking the books. So they were lying about those jobs, which is what I told you guys. I knew people that had been looking for jobs for quite a long time. I have a friend that just got a job after being laid off after 9 months. So I know. And then not only that, but Kamala Harris isn't telling people that when it comes to Black unemployment has increased. In fact, when you look at all the different races in the United States, Black unemployment increased the most. And she's not talking about that. And Biden's not talking about that because that is a bad reflection on them. So she don't want to answer the question. So I'll answer the question. We all know the economy was tough during COVID, during the pandemic. We know that. And, you know, things were shut down. The governors, it was left up to the governors whether or not they were going to close businesses and stuff like that. So it was left up to the states. Some states stayed open. Some of them did not. And I was in I'm in Massachusetts. Our state shut down. And a lot of people lost businesses and people lost their jobs. It's just a reality. That being said, though, it is now 2024. And what Kamala Harris and the Biden administration, what they have not been able to account for are all the things that have happened under their administration after that. I expect the first year was still going to be a little bit rocky because of the pandemic. But in 2024, why did Black unemployment increase? In 2024, why are the grocery prices still so high? They keep saying, oh, we're going to tackle the prices. Why can't you tackle that right now? The problem that Kamala Harris tends to run into is the fact that she is still a part of the current administration. And it would be different if it was Gavin Newsom sitting right here and he could say, well, when I'm president, I'm going to do da-da-da, even though, you know, it'd be lying shit too. But it would be different because he's not a part of the current administration. He can't sit back and say, oh, yeah, you know, you're right. We messed up there. We didn't do this. He wouldn't have to worry about that because he's not a part of the current administration. And I believe this is part of the reason why Barack Obama wanted to have an open primary. One, it was revealed that he didn't think that Kamala Harris can beat Donald Trump. But two, I think part of it is because everything that people have a problem with the Biden administration is also going to be connected to Kamala Harris. And as much as they continue to say she can separate herself from Joe Biden, that's not really happening because Joe Biden is still there and so is Kamala Harris. But she didn't answer that question.
Some of them have actually assessed that his plan would increase inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. So the facts remain that Donald Trump has a history of taking care of very rich people. And I'm not mad at anybody for being rich, but they should pay their fair share. But tax cuts for the billionaires and the top corporations in our country, and then not really paying much attention to middle-class families.
And you're going to do it for them too, because otherwise they wouldn't be endorsing you. You're going to do it for them too, because otherwise they wouldn't be donating to your campaign. I'm really supposed to believe that you care about middle-class families when you are promoting Goldman Sachs? Are you serious? I'm really supposed to believe that you care about working people in this country when you've aligned yourself with Wall Street, when you've aligned yourself with billionaires like Reid Hoffman. I'm supposed to believe that you care about middle class. First of all, what fucking middle class? What are they talking about? What is left of the middle class in the United States? The people you need to be talking to are the people who are low income, working poor. We barely have a middle class in this country. So what do you mean? Who are you trying to protect? If you tell me you're looking out for the middle class, that means you are looking out for a select few people in this country, because the majority of Americans are not middle class. I hope everybody really takes that and internalizes that, Because I want you to think about that every time you hear, we got to help the middle class. That means they're not going to help most of you. That's really what that means.
My perspective on the economy is when you grow the middle class, America's economy is stronger. And there's empirical evidence to prove my point correct.
Then let me ask you about taxes, because lots of people will say, I don't like Donald Trump, but he cut my taxes. He didn't just cut corporate expires next year. And there's some people confused saying, I don't know what's going to happen next year. Under a Harris administration, at what income level should someone expect their taxes to go up? And that state and local tax deduction that's currently capped and matters to a lot of people in blue states, you're going to lift that cap?
So first of all, when it relates to anybody making less than $400,000 a year, your taxes will not go up. Your taxes will not go up. And in fact, under my plan, taxes for 100 million Americans will actually be cut, including $6,000 a year for young couples for the first year of their child's life in a tax cut, a tax credit, essentially, by expansion of the child tax credit. And why is that? Because during the first year of a young couple, of a person's child's life, they're going to need help buying a crib, buying a car seat. And we all benefit when they're actually able to do what they naturally want to do to take care of their child.
And expand.
Did they edit that? I thought so. Can you rewind? I think they edited the interviewer's last response. Let me go back just a little bit to you talk about the tax question, I think. Let's see. Let me see, because I thought something was weird with that.
Year. And there's some people confused saying, I don't know what's going to happen next year. Under a Harris administration, at what income level should someone expect their taxes to go up? And that state and local tax deduction that's currently capped and matters to a lot of people.
Is when you grow the middle class, America's economy is stronger. And there's empirical evidence to prove my point correct.
Then let me ask you about taxes, because lots of people will say, I don't like Donald Trump, but he cut my taxes. He didn't just cut corporate taxes, he cut individual taxes. Now that expires next year. And there's some people confused saying, I don't know what's.
This must have been a recorded interview. They must have recorded this interview. Yeah, Ashura said they skipped it. Yeah, it seems like they cut something out after she said individual taxes. I think you're right. Okay. My bad, guys.
What's going to happen next year? Under a Harris administration, at what income level should someone expect their taxes to go up? And that state and local tax deduction that's currently capped and matters to a lot of people in blue states, you're going to lift that cap?
So first of all, when it relates to anybody making less than $400,000 a year, your taxes will not go up. Your taxes will not go up. And in fact, under my plan, taxes for 100 million Americans will actually be cut, including $6,000 a year for young couples for the first year of their child's life in a tax cut, a tax credit, essentially, by expansion of the child tax credit. And why is that? Because during the first year of a young couple, of a person's child's life, they're going to need help buying a crib, buying a car seat. And we all benefit when they're actually able to do what they naturally want to do to take care of their child.
And expanding that child tax.
Let me just pause here for a second. This is something that I could have sworn her and Joe Biden already said they were going to do. The $400,000, if you make under $400,000, then you wouldn't have to have the increase of taxes. I thought they had already said they were going to do that. See, if you look at like the policies on her website, we went over this a couple of nights ago. Some of these policies, a lot of them on her website, they're just Joe Biden's policies. She's just changed the number on some of them. Even the $25,000 down payment / tax credit, whatever it is tomorrow, because they keep changing the wording around that. That was also one of Biden's. It was basically they took Biden's platform and pasted on a new site and put Kamala's name on it, and they changed some of the numbers. A lot of people don't know this. Even when she talks about building more homes, that was also Biden's thing. Woo, child.
Credit, or you mentioned housing before, giving that extra money for a first home. If you can't raise corporate taxes, or if GOP takes control of the Senate, where do you get the money to do that? Do you still go forward with those plans and borrow?
Well, but we're going to have to raise corporate taxes, and we're going to have to raise we're going to have to make sure that the biggest corporations and billionaires pay their fair share.
You can do that right now. They could have been doing that right now. So that's the thing I want people to understand, because the reality is, as much as people have been complaining about the economy under their administration, they could have already done that. She's a part of the current administration.
It's just it. It's about paying their fair share. I am not mad at anyone for achieving success, but everyone should pay their fair share. And it is not right that the teachers and the firefighters that I meet every day across our country are paying a higher tax than the richest people in our country.
Bill Gates just said it this week. If he was in charge of taxes, he would have paid more. But how do you find that line to make sure corporations are paying their fair share, but they're not leaving our country?
Well, listen, I work.
First of all, the framing of that is completely ridiculous, because let's keep it real. To make sure corporations are paying their fair share, but they're not leaving our country. First of all, if they want to leave, they'll leave. You can't make them stay here. Like what is this? What kind of mess is this? Listen to her response.
With a lot of CEOs, I have spent a lot of time with CEOs, and I'm going to tell you that the business leaders who are actually part of the engine of America's economy agree that people should pay their fair share. They also agree that when we look at a plan such as mine, that is about investing in the middle class, investing in new industries, investing in bringing down costs, invest in entrepreneurs like small businesses, that the overall economy is stronger and everyone benefits. Part of my plan for the economy is investing in new industries in a way that we have active partnership with the private sector my entire career.
So you see that? Notice they got another cut here. They cut something else, or they edited something else out there. But I want to say this as well about the corporations. Everybody pay attention to the framing, because I don't know, I pay attention to like the framing. And now we've gone to, we are going to stop corporations from price gouging, to we are going to invest in bringing down costs. So these are just kind of things I don't feel like, and I don't want to be one to say, oh, this person doesn't have a plan, but I feel like these are things that she knows cannot get done. That's how I feel. And I think she's saying whatever she can right now to win, but a lot of people are going to be angry, because I've been hearing people complain about the economy since 2020. And I don't know. I mean, the way things are going right now, what's going to happen next year? What's going to happen in 2025 economically? Oh, whoops, sorry. Uh-oh. Let me reboot this. Where are we? 724? Yeah, it's something with that interview where I don't know. Okay.
Down cost. Invest in entrepreneurs like small businesses, that the overall economy is stronger and everyone benefits. Part of my plan for the economy is investing in new industries in a way that we have active partnership with the private sector. I've worked with the private sector my entire career. Even as vice president, working with some of the biggest banks and biggest tech companies to increase by billions of dollars the money going into community banks, to increase access to capital for small businesses. Why do those biggest corporations and CEOs do that? Because they know those kinds of investments, like in our small businesses, in startups and entrepreneurs, actually strengthens America's economy overall, and everyone benefits. So this is not about bilking anybody, but it is certainly about saying, let's make sure that we create opportunities for everyone to grow wealth. I believe that it is not sufficient, and it should not be our goal, to just make sure everyone is working. That should be the baseline. That should be a given. And let's create an economy where people have the ability to buy a home, to start a business, to take a nice vacation from time to time, right?
So this isn't as bad as like her last performance, but I will say this. when Kamala Harris talks about the economy and she talks about working with all these different corporations, it comes across to me like she thinks that bragging about working with Goldman Sachs is a good thing. Like she feels as though these people are doing the right thing and they actually care about what is going to happen to the working class. They don't. Most CEOs don't care. Most billionaires don't care. They care about their bottom line. And it's almost like in her mind, she thinks that this is a good thing. It's good to work with billionaires. It's good to work with Goldman Sachs. It's not. And none of those Wall Street like companies will be working with you unless there's something you're going to do for them. They're not going to just give you money and donate to you just because. They're going to want something else in return. So I highly doubt that Wall Street is going to donate money to Kamala Harris so that she can make them pay more taxes. Everybody think about this for a second and let that really sink in. And then we go to this part of the discussion about the tariffs.
About tariffs, because you just mentioned it. It's not just with one company. Donald Trump's sort of big idea is this broad-based tariffs across the board. You and many others have said that would be not only disastrous, but it would be a direct tax on the American consumer.
It would be a sales tax on the American people. That the independent economists have already measured this by the sales tax of doing a 20% tariffs on all imports that he has described would be a 20% sales tax, in essence, on basic necessities for the average American worker, average American family, totaling almost $4,000 a year. That is no small matter. Here in Pittsburgh, when I'm talking to a group of folks who work here, who live here, and when they hear it might be $4,000 more a year for them, look, people can't afford that.
But tariffs aren't unique to President Trump. President Biden has tariffs in place. He's actually looking to potentially implement more. Where do you come out on? Is there a good tariff?
Look at the look on Kamala's face when she said that. So the interviewer I will say this. I was kind of surprised that the reporter said this. She was like, but Biden does it too. She was like, what? No. You're not supposed to say that.
A bad tariff.
Well, part of it is you don't just throw around the idea of just tariffs across the board. And that's part of the problem with Donald Trump. Frankly, and I say this in all sincerity, he's just not very serious about how he thinks about some of these issues.
So now you see what Kamala just did. Like, the reporter has moved on from Donald Trump. She already asked about that part of the conversation, right? But now she's saying that Biden does it too. And so Kamala, instead of responding to Biden also implementing tariffs, she pivots back to Donald Trump. Because she doesn't want to have to criticize Joe Biden doing the same thing. Also, when we talk about the tax issues, don't forget the Biden administration continued some of Trump's tax cuts for the wealthy. And
one must be serious and have a plan, and a real plan that's not just about some talking point ending in an exclamation at a political rally, but actually putting the thought into what will be the return on the investment, what will be the economic impact on everyday people. And when you look at my plans, you will see what those benefits will be. $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. You know what that means? Then you're creating the ability of that working person to build intergenerational wealth.
See, she's gone from $25,000 down payment assistance to $25,000 tax credit for the home. And on her website, it says up to $25,000. And I just keep saying this every time she says it because I don't want people to be disappointed. I don't want people to think they're going to get $25,000 for down payment assistance. I don't think that's what this is going to be at all. I'm just keeping it real with you. If it sounds a little too good to be true and they haven't explained how they're going to do it and they keep flip-flopping on the terms, don't know.
Doing the work of a $6,000 child tax credit, doing the work of a $50,000 tax deduction for first-time small businesses, startups, because right
That's
now
a real plan.
It's a real plan because right now, and again, it's about paying attention to the detail and being serious about it. I'm serious about my enthusiasm and for small businesses and my belief in what they will do as part of America's economic engine.
On Friday,
So looking at the fact that right now the tax deduction is $5,000, nobody in this year of our Lord 2024 can start a small business with $5,000. Very few can. So extending it to $50,000 tax deduction for startups to generate the innovation and the ambition of the ideas that are present and among us, but need the fuel to be able to actually achieve the goal.
So again, as I said before, a lot of Kamala's policies to me connect with the laptop class, or it connects with college educated or college graduates that cannot pursue starting a family or buying a home because they're not financially where they need to be to do that just yet. And because the economy, et cetera, and housing is expensive. Some of the things that she talks about, like small businesses, starting a business, and don't get me wrong, I think small businesses are great. I love mom and pop businesses. I'd rather go to them than to the megacorps, obviously. But the reality is, it seems like there's a lot of focus on entrepreneurship, and that tends to resonate with a certain class of people. And the reality is, everybody doesn't want to start a small business. Some people just want to work for a company. Some people just want to work for someone else. Not everyone wants to be a boss. And that worries me, that there's so much focus on starting a small business as if that is going to be the answer. And the reality is, everyone can't start a business. Everyone can't be an entrepreneur. What are you going to do for the people who just want to work for someone else? I don't hear anything about the dollar amount for the minimum wage. Even on her website, there's no dollar amount. What do you mean? Raise the minimum wage? Raise it to what? $8 instead of $7.25? It's such a mess. It's such a mess. I think that it just goes to show you how out of touch a lot of politicians are. And I do think that Kamala Harris is out of touch. I don't think that she has that connection to the working class, particularly those that are lower income. It just seems like she does not have that connection. And some of the things that she's talking about, like I said before, if I were to go to the hood and ask people, hey, what do you want? What are you looking for? It just, the things that she's talking about, it does not resonate with a lot of people that are in that particular situation. I don't know, man. It's a hot mess. I will say she did better on that interview than some of the other ones, but it's also very weird to me that they didn't ask any questions about foreign policy in that interview. And that tells me that either Kamala's camp said not to ask it, or the reporter was afraid to ask about it. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Sparky. Cat Williams was great on the Boondocks, voicing the character a pimp named Slickback. Yes, he was. I love the Boondocks. Thank you, Mike. Kamala's economic plan will give us all a stipend to buy some greens to wash in the bathtub, but you got to buy your own smoked meat. Oh, Mike, why you do this? Teddy says a depression is coming, Sabby, by spring 2025. That's what I'm wondering. Like, they keep saying, oh, we'll just get the prices down. And I'm like, you could do that now. Thank you, Mary. Joe's still president and Kamala's covering. She obviously doesn't care about presidency now, so why would she care in 3 months? Spending millions and begging me for more for a job she thinks a vegetable can do. That's a good point. The Oracle says someone needs to ask her how she plans to close the wealth gap. Ooh, that's a good one. Thank you, Maddie. If Kamala cares about small businesses, how come Wells Fargo was allowed to freeze the account of Beautiful Curly Me, a small black doll company, over a physical address? That's a good question. Thank you, Courtney. Clip Kamala's facial expression as a thumbnail for this video segment. Thanks for the tip there, Courtney. Thanks for the tip. All right, guys, we're going to go into this Aaron Mate story really quick. Smash the like. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. If you already did so, thank you for hitting that like button, hun. And we're moving on to Aaron Mate goes off. Piers Morgan decided to have another panel with people yelling and screaming all over each other. But Aaron Mate was able to get some golden nuggets in that I think you guys should hear. And more importantly, what's great about this conversation is at the end of the discussion, the question is asked, how do you move forward in the Middle East? What is to be done? And I think that Aaron had the perfect answer to that. And oftentimes they're not talking about solutions on these debates that Piers Morgan has, but this time they do. And I think people need to hear it. So we're going to get started with this part here. Who started this war? And I think this is where things really start to get a little bit heated in this discussion. So let's go ahead and dive in here. Who started this war?
We are nearly a year into this war in Gaza. It now looks increasingly likely there might be another phase of this war erupting, or already has erupted, in Lebanon. The question I have wrestled with since October the 7th is not whether Israel has a right to defend itself if it's attacked, but what is the proportionate response which should be tolerated of a nation that comes under that attack. And that's setting aside the history of the conflict. When you are attacked as they were on October the 7th, you obviously have to fight back hard, particularly as Hamas said, we're going to keep doing this. If Hezbollah wants to respond to what happened on October the 7th by within hours, unleashing rockets at Israel and carrying on doing that for the next year, again, Israel has a right to defend itself. The question is, what is proportionate? Do you accept, first of all, Aaron, that Israel has a right, if not a duty, to its people to defend itself? And if you accept that, then what is proportionate? Who determines that?
Let me pause here because there was something I noticed right off the bat, right? Piers Morgan said Israel has a right to defend itself 3 times in that little statement he just gave. 3 times already. So don't get it twisted. When Piers Morgan has these debates, it's very clear he's on the side of Israel. We already know, we went over Rupert Murdoch was his mentor. We went over all of that. Rupert Murdoch is a big Zionist. He also owns Fox News. He's a billionaire. So Piers Morgan makes a point to mention that not once, not twice, but 3 times in the short moment that he just spoke. Think about that for a second.
Every state, including Israel, has the right to defend itself, but let's examine what that right entails. If we're talking about October 7th, when, yes, some Hamas militants committed atrocities, they're on camera. There was a claim before, by the way, that there was rape by Hamas. There actually isn't evidence for a single case of rape, even 1 year later. And I'm happy
I'm sorry. I've got to stop.
Hold on a second.
I have to correct you.
See, they have to interrupt here because, God forbid, someone said there was no evidence. And this is true. There's no evidence. None. But there is evidence that Palestinian detainees at the Palestinian Detention Center have been sexually assaulted by IDF soldiers on video camera. And you never hear Piers Morgan bring that up. You won't hear these women here in the middle bring this up. You won't hear them mention that. Ask yourself why.
I have seen.
My point.
There has been widespread evidence of rape and sexual abuse against women on October the 7th.
There hasn't. There actually hasn't. We'll debate that some other time. We'll debate that some other time. I'm going to finish my point. There is not a single shred of evidence for it, but we'll debate some other time. Listen. We're talking about October 7th. Israel has the right on October 7th to defend its people. Let me finish my... Piers, every time I come on here, I can't talk.
Okay,
let me
look,
talk.
to be fair,
Aaron,
I
didn't interrupt you.
Aaron, okay.
You can talk.
Let me deal with this.
Anybody.
Aaron, look what I would say. You say every time you come on here this happens, but you just started with an unbelievably inflammatory and incorrect statement, which is that there was no sexual abuse of women on October the 7th.
But there have been moments and several times where the Israeli panelists that have come onto the show have started off with inflammatory statements, and not once do you interrupt them. Not once does Piers Morgan interrupt them. And I hope people are paying attention to that, because again, like I said, it shows you what side Piers is on. If Piers Morgan wants to make it so that there aren't those constant interruptions, he can mute the people who are interrupting the same way that I do when I host panels on this show. When I hosted the Black voter panel, when we do that a couple of times, we should be doing that again in October. When people start interrupting and get to the point where you can't hear the person that's talking, I will mute people. They can do the same thing. They don't mute them because they want the people to interrupt what they're saying, because they're criticizing Israel and they're debunking Israel's lies. And that is why they want them to do that. So people got to understand, he can mute them if he wanted to. He wants them to interrupt.
There
my
are
previous
multiple.
We'll debate that some other time.
Sexual
It's a
abuse
fact.
and rape.
No. Okay. There's not. Anyway, listen. If we're talking about October 7th, I'm going to finish my sentence.
Let him speak, please.
Okay. I didn't interrupt you. They said multiple inflammatory things. I didn't interrupt them. Thank you.
All right. Finish your point.
If we're talking about on October 7th, yes.
Let him speak, Elika,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you. If we're talking about on October 7th, yes, Israel has the right to defend its civilians if they're being attacked. Okay, but Israel is an occupying power, and it's been an occupying power for decades. Occupiers don't have the right to defend their occupation. Israel doesn't have the right to fire a single bullet into Gaza. It has obligations. Occupiers have obligations. And if Israel wanted peace and security, what it would do is join the entire world, join the International Court of Justice, which just ruled that Israel doesn't have the right to control a single inch of the West Bank or Gaza, and end the occupation and address its decades-long attacks on Palestinians and also Lebanese, because, as was previously said, Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, killed tens of thousands of people, and that's why Hezbollah was formed. If Israel wanted genuine peace and security, and it wanted to defend itself, it would stop brutalizing other people. And this claim was made before. What was Israel supposed to do in response to its people being kidnapped? That's the logic of October 7th, because there are thousands of Palestinians who have been brutalized and kidnapped in Israeli dungeons. Hamas launched October 7th to free them. The difference between Israel and Hamas is that Hamas actually has an argument, because Hamas has tried. I didn't interrupt you. I did not interrupt you, please.
I wasn't lying.
Hamas has tried to accept the. You were actually. Hamas has tried to accept the global consensus of a two-state solution, a big compromise for Palestinians, accepting just 22% of their homeland in the West Bank and Gaza. Israel's refused to join the rest of the world in accepting that two-state solution. Even Iran has voiced at times support for that. It's only Israel and the U.S. that insist on Israel's right to put Gaza under siege and steal Palestinian land in the West Bank. And that's why you have this continued escalation. Hezbollah intervened on October 8th because they wanted to show Israel that there would be costs for committing mass murder, which is what Israel has done. And that's why Hezbollah was involved. Hezbollah said from the start it would stop its rockets if Israel stopped committing mass murder. Israel, unfortunately, is more committed to mass murder because it insists on the right to control that entire land and not accept Palestinians as equal human beings. That's the fundamental problem here.
Okay.
And to add something to that, because this is the part that I think, again, they get really upset when you say the occupation. They get really angry about that. Because the reality is this: if it is true that Israel wants peace, they wouldn't occupy those people to begin with. If it's true that they want peace, they wouldn't oppress those people. You see, now they don't want to go back on this now, because the reality is like, if they say in the occupation, they're afraid to end the occupation because they know all those years that you've oppressed those people, all those years that you could just cut off their lights, their water, their resources whenever you feel like it. You know, those people have felt some type of way against you, and you can't blame them for that. And the reality is, though, Israel is the entity that is in power. They control the land, the air, and the sea. It is an occupying apartheid state. And they hate it when you say that, but it's a reality. If they wanted peace, they wouldn't occupy people. If they wanted peace, they wouldn't oppress people. If they wanted peace, they wouldn't be blowing people up. It's just obvious as day. So the reality is they don't want peace. They want to occupy the entire region. They want southern Lebanon. They want the West Bank. They want Gaza. They want all of it. They do not want any Arab people there, period. And before people come to me and say, there's Palestinian Christians that live in Israel. Yeah. And people have interviewed them as well. They're not treated well either. Don't think that just because there are those who are Palestinian Christians that live in Israel and that are not in Gaza, don't think that they're treated the same as the Israelis there, because they're not. This is a fundamental issue. They want control. They want the land. They don't want Arabs there. And it's not even just about Arabs. There was an article from The Guardian a couple of years ago that discussed how they were sterilizing Ethiopian women against their will so they wouldn't have any babies because they didn't want more Ethiopian Jews. It's a hot mess.
Fleur Hassan Nahum,
I don't know where to start. I really don't know where to start. First of all, he's talking about mass murder on October 8th. We were attacked on October 7th. We hadn't even gone in on October 8th. So I really don't understand what you're talking about. Secondly, he completely
You were waging the longest military occupation in the world.
Yes. Well, let's go to that. In 2005, Israel left the Gaza Strip. Now, at that point, the Gazans could have done one of two things: turn it into a wonderful pilot for a Palestinian state, which you think they want, and I don't believe they actually do. And instead, they turned it into Mogadishu, into Beirut, as it were. Instead of investing in his people, they invested in tunnels to attack and to use their people as human shields. That's just a fact. Tell me, why did they not build a beautiful place in 2005 until today? You know why? Because Hamas came into power, and Hamas is not interested in a state. Hamas is interested in destroying the Jewish state, and that is the crux of the conflict. And you're on the wrong side of history. One day you're going to wake up and realize this. At the bottom line is that the conflict is not because there isn't a Palestinian state. The conflict is because there's a Jewish state that has never been accepted. And that's why in 1947, they didn't accept the partition plan. And that is why after Oslo in 2000, they didn't accept the two-state solution. We gave them 93% of the West Bank and the entire Gaza.
Listen to the way that she's speaking. We gave them, first of all, two things. Number one, no one has to accept an occupier and an oppressor. That's just like what you have said to the slaves in the United States. Would you have said you didn't accept your master? Oh my God, the slaves, they want to be free. They don't want to accept their master. Get out of here. Two, when you are occupying a group of people and you decide to give them money, because let's remember, they gave money to Hamas. When you decide to give money to a group of people that you are occupying, you do not have the right to tell them how to spend it. So if they wanted to take that money and they wanted to build tunnels, if they wanted to build buildings, if they wanted to just build a damn giant ass circus, they can do what they want with that money because you are occupying them. Like the words that I hear, we offered to give them this and that. You shouldn't have took it. How you take somebody's land, you take somebody's property and say, okay, I'm going to give you like 10% of this back. It wasn't yours. It wasn't yours to take.
So in 2009, an even more generous peace deal, and they didn't accept it. And the bottom line is this. They don't want a state. They want, and they're invested emotionally, logistically, and militarily in the destruction of the state of Israel. Israel wants to live in peace. We don't want to rule another people.
Okay,
It's
but Fleur,
difficult
all
enough
right,
ruling the
Fleur,
people
but Fleur,
we
let me
have.
ask you
And
this.
by the way,
All right, hang on, please. Hang on, let me
20% of our
ask a question.
population are Arabs
No, Fleur,
in our
let me ask
country
you a question.
that live side by side with Jews.
Yeah, Fleur, here's what I don't get about what you've just said. is that you talk about destruction and the threat of destruction. And I get that. Hamas is wedded to destroying Israel, as are Hezbollah.
It's in
Fine.
their charter.
Fine. But what is Israel doing right now in Gaza? You are destroying it.
She keeps saying it's in the charter. I just want to let everybody know that's the old charter. The woman right here, that's the old charter. They had a new charter, and they never reference what the new charter says. They consistently go back to the old charter. That is on purpose.
Destroying Gaza, and you're killing tens of
back and
thousands of
dismantle
people
the terrorists
in the process. No, but you are destroying Gaza in the most extraordinarily brutal manner.
Okay.
And you're going after
You're going after.
Let me finish, please. You're going after Hamas now in the very areas where you told the civilian population to go to. And in the process, you're killing a lot of innocent people. How can that be justified?
Hamas went into the humanitarian corridors because that's what they do. Exactly what.
Wait a minute. So everybody, I hope you're paying attention to the game that they play. And she said, well, they went into, well, what you claim, if you know that Hamas went into a certain territory, then you've known where they've been all this time. If you know exactly how they've been moving, then you've known where they've been all this time, and you could have just went directly to them. I hope everybody is paying attention to what is being revealed. So either she's lying or she's telling the truth. And if she's telling, for her sake, I hope she's lying. Because if she's telling the truth, that tells you that they've always known where they were. They know where they were every time. And if they know where they are every time, why are they killing all these civilians but not taking out Hamas?
Angelica says that is their modus operandi. They don't build tunnels under schools.
Well, if
They
you know
build
that, why
schools
do you
on
send
top of
people to these
tunnels.
specific areas?
We send them areas thinking that those areas are going to be areas we're not going to attack, and then Hamas throws rockets at us and attack our soldiers. Look, ultimately, we want two things. We want the dismantlement of Hamas, who is an existential threat to the state of Israel, and we want our hostages back. If that
Everybody is a threat to you, man. Everybody is a threat to you. But you're not a threat to anybody else. Anybody notice this? Anybody? Now, she says that they're in the tunnels. They always keep saying they're in the tunnels. Why aren't they going into those tunnels? If you know they're in the tunnels, why aren't you going there? Because that's not the goal. The goal is to destroy all of them. They knew a year and a half before October 7th, they saw the plans from Hamas to attack. They already saw that. That was reported by the New York Times. And they said, oh, we didn't think it was possible. Really? If there's so much of a threat as that woman says that they are, and the IDF says they are, and Netanyahu says they are, why would you not take that seriously? You see, they exposed themselves. We're going to go to another part here.
Because of the continued attacks, they go in once more. And because the PLO doesn't leave, they have to create this occupation, right? And then as soon as they removed the occupation in 2000 with Ehud Barak and Clinton, what happens is that Hezbollah advances to the border of Israel and starts attacking again. And then comes the UN resolution 1701 requiring not only that Hezbollah stays 10 kilometers back from the northern border, okay, but also that all of these militias in Lebanon have to disband, and there can only be a militarized Lebanese government. Israel abided. Who did not abide? Hezbollah. Then what did Hezbollah do for 18 years? For 18 years in the zone that they were not allowed to be, they started expanding their military capacities up to 200,000 munitions, and then finally on October 8th started attacking. And then when Israel responded with that pager attack, why did they do that? Why did they do that? Because the commanders, the leaders of Hezbollah had a plan to attack northern Galilee and do a second October 7th, kidnap hostages with a ground invasion. Now you tell me, what should Israel do?
Okay. Well, first of all, Israel shouldn't have been attacking Lebanon prior to that. Israel has been bullying Lebanon for quite some time. You took land. That's how you got a Hezbollah. That's how you got a Hamas. So stop it with the what should Israel do? The pagers that they did, they knew damn well that civilians were going to be killed, and most likely more civilians than Hezbollah.
Okay.
De-escalation through escalation.
Okay, hang on. I'll go to Aaron.
It's always easier
Aaron,
for them to blame
let
Israel.
Aaron Mate respond to that. What Israel's supposed to do in that eventuality?
What Israel should do is, for the first time in its history, abandon its quest for regional domination and supremacy. Starting in 1947, just a brief tour through history. Yes, Israel accepted partition publicly. Palestinians didn't. It's not nice to welcome the partition of your land, which is being stolen by foreigners. But privately, Israeli leaders, including David Ben-Gurion, said, we won't accept partition. We'll define for ourselves what our borders are. And that's why they proceeded to expel hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, including into Lebanon, creating this crisis. They refused to address that. Instead of addressing their expulsion of Palestinians and theft of their land, they've stolen more. In 1967. In 1982, the reason Israel invades Lebanon is because the PLO was there, and the PLO at that time was joining the rest of the world in accepting a compromise of a Palestinian state. Google the Arab Peace Initiative. It's been renewed many times to Israel. Israel's been offered by all the Arab states and the PLO, with even Iran joining them and accepting this. Everybody recognizing Israel, everybody making peace in exchange for Israel ending its occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. That's a major compromise for Palestinians. Israel is so hell-bent on domination, occupation, and supremacy, it's refused even to accept a Palestinian compromise. When Hamas tried to join that after 2005, when Israel withdrew, Israel still put Gaza under a complete siege, prevented any basic goods from getting in, carried out routine massacres. Even when Hamas leaders, including Ismail Haniyeh, who Israel recently killed, said, we will accept a Palestinian state, Israel will not accept it because Israel wants to dominate that region. That's the fundamental problem here. And as it was previously said, as long as Israel insists on supremacy and occupation, people are going to resist it. People will resist it. It's true. Google the Arab Peace Initiative, 2002. Google it.
The Camp David Accords, 2000. What happened with the Clinton parameters, 2001?
I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you what happened. You know what? I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you what happened. The former Israeli foreign minister, Shlomo Ben-Ami, who was there at Camp David, do you want to know what he said?
Does this woman have like a contour? Is this a contouring issue, or does she have a really bad nose job? Because it looked like she got like she did like the plastic surgery to get like the Michael Jackson nose. That's kind of what it looked like.
Was there at Camp David. This is the foreign minister who made the Camp David offer. He said, if I were Palestinian, I would have rejected Camp David as well. You know why? Because he recognizes that Israel insisted on keeping the major West Bank settlement blocks that make a Palestinian state impossible. That's the fundamental problem here. You don't see Palestinians as equal human beings, and you reserve the right to steal their land. And that's why you're interrupting me, because you can't handle the truth. That's the problem here. Stop being a supremacist.
Aaron said he went full what's the name of the movie with Jesus, that you can't handle the truth? You can't handle the truth. You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. A few good men.
Stop stealing land and you can have peace.
Here's, just go to 2024. Can I just say one quick thing?
Okay, let me bring in Wajahat, please.
Just one quick.
And we're going to go to one other part too as well. He said, stop stealing land and you can have peace. Yeah, that's a big part of it, right? Like they want peace, but they also want to just like take people out whenever they feel like it. You know, they want to kidnap Palestinian kids and not to mention what they've done to those children in the detention centers as well. Not let them have like a real trial or anything like that. It is absolutely disgusting. And he's right. Netanyahu has been on record for decades saying he does not want a Palestinian state, because if you get a Palestinian state, that means that Palestinian state also gets a military. That's part of the reason. This goes into the future. What is the best option moving forward?
Great. Then why didn't Arafat continue negotiating? And I'll tell you this, and I'll repeat it again, because the problem of this conflict is not that a Palestinian state doesn't exist. It's that a Jewish state exists, and they've never, ever ideologically accepted it. And why do I know? Because they keep telling me. Because they have charters. Because that's their constitution.
You have Google.
Why should they accept you when you stole their land? You kicked them off their land. Why should they accept you? Again, I said this before. Like, that's like asking a slave to accept their master. Like, why should they accept you?
And that's the educational system. And that's the media. Enough with Google. Don't you read anything else?
All right, listen.
Yeah, Google Arab League Peace Initiative.
Okay, listen.
Google Arab League. That's the Arab League offering Israel full normalization,
hang on, everyone.
occupation. If you want to talk about Palestinian Mandelas, if you want to talk about Palestinian Mandelas, they exist. For example, in March 2018, thousands of Palestinian Mandelas marched peacefully in Gaza in the Great March of Return, calling for their basic rights. What did Israel do? It gunned them down with snipers, maiming people, paralyzing them. That's the Palestinian Mandela. They're people of Gaza who've been besieged for decades, wanting their basic rights.
Are you saying the Palestinian Mandelas in Hamas? Have you ever been to Gaza? Honestly, you people are talking like armchair.
First of all, those people that were protesting that he's referring to, I've seen the documentaries about this. Those people were not Hamas. Jesus Christ.
Yes, I have been to Gaza. Yes, I have.
Okay, sure.
I have been to Gaza, actually. And I've met the people there.
Lucky you're not a woman then.
They've never been given the chance. Okay, can I talk now?
No, they've never been given the chance. 2005 never gave them that chance. Stop infantilizing the Palestinian leadership and the people.
I'm going to talk now. I'm going to speak now. You've had your time to speak your propaganda. I'll say it again. Israel has never accepted the fundamental premise that Palestinians have the right to self-determination. That's why it rejected multiple Arab League peace offers endorsed by Iran and Hamas, and members of Hamas, not all of them, but some of the leadership, including Ismail Haniyeh, calling for a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. That's a big compromise for Palestinians. That's just 22% of the land that you stole, which they're willing to accept. But Israel is so hell-bent on occupying and stealing land, it won't even accept a Palestinian surrender. You don't want a Palestinian Mandela.
Surrender?
You want to keep subjugating Palestinians.
What are you talking about? You're living in your own planet where Islamic fundamentalism does not exist in your planet.
You're the fundamentalist who insists on stealing other people's land. You're the fundamentalist.
Okay, time out.
And that's when it kind of comes to a close there, just because everybody was interrupting and Pierce was like, we got to get up out of this piece. But I will just say this, it's really sad that so many people believe that. It's really sad that so many people have been brainwashed to believe that they have done nothing wrong, that they've done nothing wrong to these people. It drives me mad and insane. And they feel, and to feel as though you've done nothing wrong because you have been taught that the land is supposed to belong to you. Even if you believe that part, how can you defend the abuse, the occupation, the oppression, the killing of the Arab people? How can you defend it? How can you defend the sterilization of the Ethiopian women against their will? How can you defend it? You can only defend that if you believe that you have a divine right, and if you prescribe yourself to the supremacy that Aaron was speaking of. That's the only way you can defend it. When you have that supremacy, when you believe that you are the supreme one and you are the only one that should be there because of it, that's how you do it. There's no other way. And I don't care what you were taught. There are a number of people that were raised to be Zionists that woke up. And I don't want to hear the whole, my parents taught me. Parents teach you a lot of things that you don't follow, okay? Parents teach you a lot of things that you don't go along with as you get older and you decide to do something different. So that whole excuse is, this is the way that I was raised. You were raised to do a lot of things. Some of you were raised not to drink underage. Some of you were raised not to have sex before marriage. Some of you were raised, not to, live with a man unless you were married or whatever. Some of you are raised to do certain things, but you did it any damn way. So stop it with this is the way that I was raised and this is what I was taught. Because when it was time for you to go against what you were taught, you had no problem doing that with other things. But this one thing you got to hold on to, because the reality is you want it to be that way. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. You want it to be that way. You want to have the region. You want to have the land. Just say that and stop calling everybody Hamas and Hezbollah and everybody that's not like you. Let's go to some of the comments. They got me hot. And I got a cold too. It pissed me off. Brendan said Pierce is a shitty moderator because he tries to put his thumb on the scale in one direction or another. That's not a moderator. It's a pundit. Ooh. Pulse here. This lady says all of Palestinians don't want a state and that we're all Hamas. This is the same lady that denied the fact that Israel bombed churches in Gaza. She did. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I thought I saw her on here before. Thank you, Jasmine. I notice more and more that some of the most cold-blooded people in supremacist structures are the women who then turn around and expect sympathy for their oppression. I told you, I'm telling you, I told you. I remember the first time I had a female supervisor and I was excited because I was like, yay, wow, I get a female supervisor. You know, this is going to be base, it's going to be chill. No, it was like, oftentimes the women, they were more harsh than the men were. And I was like, damn, what is this? Ravina says, don't play with Aaron. He forgot more than they probably ever knew about the issue. Thank you, Saka Papa. Sabby, on behalf of Iranians, we disown Alicia Leban. A lot of Iranian ladies, especially monarchists, have nose jobs and other plastic jobs. Interesting. And thank you, Lana. That bee with the eyebrows should have never been allowed on TV again after she said there are no Christians in Gaza on LBC. Oh, wow. I didn't know she said that, but that's definitely a lie. Oh, my God. Deepness. Okay, guys. I know a lot of you, some of you, are not into supporting the presidential election and whatever it is, what it is. I'm not voting for Kamala or Donald Trump. I'll be supporting Jill Stein. But I always encourage those of you to go out and support the ballot measures for your state. We've already covered California and Alabama, and now we're moving into Arizona. Arizona. All I know is that Arizona is a hot place. So let's see what's happening in Arizona this year. What is going to be on the ballot? First and foremost, in Arizona, citizens there may initiate a legislation and amendments through the process of direct initiative. This is the one of the easier ways. This means successful petitions bypass the Arizona legislature and go directly on the ballot for voters to vote on. My state is the opposite. Massachusetts here, it's indirect. We can't bypass the legislator. That is why states like California and Arizona often have more ballot measures than we do. I think we have 5. California, I think, had maybe 14. Arizona has quite a bit as well. So let's go ahead and jump down here. The single subject rule. Arizona Constitution contains a single subject rule for citizen initiative ballot measures, and that was enacted in 2022. So what that means, folks, is that you can't have 2 subjects under one ballot measure. That they have to be separate. In Arizona, initiated measures and amendments are not governed by subject restrictions, but are required to designate a funding source if they mandate state expenditures. So let's go ahead and see the proposition for Arizona. We're going to scoot ahead here. Okay. Proposition 133, require partisan primaries and prohibit primaries where candidates compete regardless of party affiliation amendment. Interesting. A yes vote supports this constitutional amendment to require partisan primary elections for partisan offices, prohibit primary elections where all candidates, regardless of political party affiliation, run in the same primary election, such as top 2, top 4, and top 5 primaries. provide that the state's direct primary election law supersedes local charters and ordinances that are inconsistent with that law. So it says this is current practice in Arizona. The constitutional amendment would add this practice to the Constitution, prohibiting future changes without another constitutional amendment. So that's important to note. Who supports this? Mainly Republican senators, right? And representatives. All the Republican Party supports it. Organizations, Arizona Free Enterprise Club and Heritage Action for America. Here's one of the arguments. Most voters are not centrist. Most voters are left or most voters are right. And so by structuring a system where all we can get out of its moderates, nobody gets their first choice. That is interesting. Who's opposed to this? State Senator Priya, who's a Democrat. Organizations that are against it is the Arizona Public Health Association, the League of Women Voters of Arizona, and Represent.us. Here's one of the arguments. With this, we are preempting the ability of local political subdivisions from holding elections in a certain format that they may see fit for their own political locality. Our cities have methods for regulating their process, and there's no need for the entire state to have to weigh in on the way our cities conduct their own elections. What we should be doing is allowing the laboratories of democracy to participate as the laboratories of democracy. So far, there's been no money spent to support or oppose this. Here's a note here from Roger Meadows, who helps me out with these. He said, of course, this was put there by the legislator, always trying to divide the electorate with their partisanship, keeping us busy instead of at their throats. 30.06% of Arizonians are Democrat, 34.13% are Republican, and 29.15% are non-affiliated. This explains why they're a swing state. My solution would be a CICA, citizen-initiated constitutional amendment, to make the existence of political parties anywhere in the state of Arizona unconstitutional. This applies to not just the electorate, but to those who serve in government, regardless of the level of government they wish to serve in, no matter the location they wish to serve. That's an interesting one. Arizona Proposition 134, signature distribution requirement for initiatives amendment. A yes vote supports establishing a signature distribution requirement for citizen initiatives, meaning that instead of requiring 10% of votes cast for the governor statewide for initiated state statutes for the ballot, and 15% of votes for 15% of votes cast for the governor statewide to qualify initiated constitutional amendments for the ballot, the initiative would require signatures from 10% of votes cast for the governor in each legislative district to qualify initiated state statutes for the ballot, and require signatures from 15% of votes cast for each governor in each legislative district. So what they're doing here is that they're trying to move this from the 10% votes cast for governor statewide. They're trying to move it from statewide to legislative district. And let's go a little bit further into this. Who supports it? State Representative David Livingston, he's Republican. Organization Arizona Farm Bureau and Arizona Free Enterprise Club. Here's one of the arguments. We need to recognize that counties outside Maricopa matter, and this makes sure the other 14 counties matter. That's interesting. Who's opposed to this? Of course, Democratic Party. State Senator Juan Mendez. Organizations opposed to it: Arizona Public Health Association, the League of Women Voters of Arizona. Here's one of the arguments here. This is effectively going to allow a single partisan legislative district to block the desires of the whole state. There is no money spent to support or oppose it. A note here from Roger, they say legislate the districts, but they don't specify which legislative districts. Is it congressional districts, state Senate districts, state house districts, or municipal districts. Unless they're talking about all of them, if that's the case, this will be a big hell no. And that's something that happens sometimes with these ballot measures, is that they leave things kind of vague so that you don't know. And that's usually done when they either want something to pass. So it's like you're hesitant. So you're just like, yes, okay, whatever. I think that sounds right. Or you're hesitant. You're like, no, I don't understand it. So whatever. But sometimes that's done on purpose. Arizona Proposition 135, Emergency Declarations Amendment. A yes vote supports providing the state legislator to terminate a state of emergency or alter the emergency powers granted to the governor during a state emergency, and providing a state emergency to automatically terminate 30 days after it is declared, unless the state legislator extends the emergency powers granted to the governor, except in cases for a state of war emergency or an emergency arising from a flood or a fire. That is interesting. So who supports that? State Representative Joseph Chaplick. He's Republican. Organizations, the Arizona Free Enterprise Club. Here's one of the arguments. While reforms are necessary, it is crucial to have a mechanism in place now that ensures proper checks and balances of the delegated authority, no matter what current or future statutes on emergency powers look like. The most appropriate place to resolve these fundamental questions of how our government functions and how to employ checks and balances is within the framework of the Constitution. Right now, it is entirely devoid of a process for the legislator to check executive authority. That's why it's critical that the legislator send HCR 2039 to the voters. If it's passed, it will answer this question in the Arizona Constitution to restrict the power of the governor during a declared emergency. After the declaration, the governor would be required to call the legislator into a special session by the 10th day, and it would automatically terminate after 30 days unless extended by concurrent resolution of the legislator. That's interesting. Who's opposed to it? The Democrat State Representative or State Senator Priya, of course. Organizations, Arizona House Democrats, Arizona Public Health Association, and the League of Women Voters of Arizona. Here's one of the arguments. The reality is that once a state emergency is called, it slips quickly from the media and the minds of the public. However, the lasting effects are ongoing and deeply personal for millions of Arizonans. There has been no campaign finance money spent to support or oppose. Rogers says that he would vote for this. Okay. Now we get to, are these all, hold on one second. I was just making sure when we got to, because we have to start. I'm going to come back to that amendment one because that one's pretty lengthy. I should have started with the propositions. So I'm going to come back to that one and we're going to dive into the propositions. Arizona Proposition 137, in-term limits and retention elections for Supreme Court justices and Superior Court justices, judges amendment. A yes vote supports ending term limits for the state Supreme Court justice and Superior Court judge, replacing them with terms of good behavior unless decided otherwise by a judicial review commission. And it would end retention elections at the end of the judicial term. Interesting. We're talking about term limits, ladies and gentlemen. Who supports this? Republican Party, State Representative Alexander Culloden and State Senator David Gowan. Also, the Arizona Judges Association. Here's one of the arguments here. Judicial retention is not really working. Our judicial retention process is leading to these ballots that are pages of pages of pages. There's like a full third of voters who aren't even voting on judicial retention, which is not a helpful check in our system of checks and balances. Who opposes this? The Democratic Party. Senator Flavio, Caesar, and Laura. the League of Women Voters of Arizona, Progress Arizona. And one of the arguments is this one here from Representative Ortiz. Now, as much as ever, the people are aware of the tremendous power and the way it can be abused. SCR 1044 would take away my right and the right of my constituents who want to vote to not retain those justices who approved the 1864 abortion ban. This is what authoritarianism looks like, folks. It's terrifying. No money spent to support or oppose. A note here from Roger. Vote to end term limits for the highest court in the state and only serving as long as they are serving in good faith and under good behavior, making them like a Supreme Court of the United States. Hell to the no. You knew this was put on the ballot by the legislator, not the citizens. So that is very scary. And if I was in Arizona, I would vote against that. That's very scary. Here's something that's different for wages. Proposition 138, wages for tipped workers amendment. I think we have this on the ballot in Massachusetts as well this year. This was a big one that's getting a lot of buzz, ladies and gentlemen. A yes vote supports allowing for tipped workers to be paid 25% less per hour than the minimum wage if any tips received by the employee were not less than the minimum wage plus $2 for all hours worked. Okay, let's pause for a second. I really want to break this down. So if you're a waitress or a bartender and you're working for tips, if you vote yes for this measure, it means that you will be able to get paid 25% less per hour than the minimum wage if any of your tips received by yourself were not less than the minimum wage plus $2 for all hours worked. So here's why I think this is going to be a problem. A lot of times, for those of us that have waited, I used to wait tables, those of us that waited tables, sometimes you get credit card tips and sometimes you get cash tips. The reality is, most of the time, waiters don't enter their cash tips. The credit card tips are automatically entered into the system. But the cash tips, most people don't enter that. So how are they going to know what your tips actually were if some of your tips are cash? Anybody want to tell me? Because this one, I don't know. The one from Massachusetts is not worded this way. The one from Massachusetts is to increase the minimum wage for tip workers. But this one, right, Cynical says this was deliberately confusing. Yeah, like this, I don't know that, like, how are they going to know? This was going to be tough. This was going to be tough. And I wouldn't be surprised if more waiters or whatever, if the customer asks, is it better for me to leave it in the tip on the credit card or cash? I wouldn't be surprised if more waiters are going to say cash. So yeah, Soccer Papa said, that's why I always tip cash. Yeah, if you can, because that, okay. So it goes on to say that businesses in Arizona can pay tip workers $11.35, which is $3 less than the current minimum wage of $14.35 an hour. So in Massachusetts, like, our tip workers aren't making $11 an hour, just FYI. We don't make that much. So it goes on to say, under this new amendment, businesses would be able to pay workers $3.58 less than the current minimum wage of $14.35, which is basically $10.77 an hour, provided that the total take-home pay of each worker is at least the hourly minimum wage plus $2 for each hour worked. I can see this being a problem. I can see this being a problem. And honestly, I think all this could be avoided if they just paid people living wage. Like, this is ridiculous. Marianne said, what happened? Too many waiters made it to Club Med or something. I'm wondering about that too. Like, this is a yikes. Who supports this? Republican Party, State Senator Javin Daniel Messner, State Representative Justin Wellmuth, organizations, Arizona Restaurant Organization, and of course they would, right? Here's one of the arguments. We all know that the restaurant industry is a very small profit industry. If you have a disparity in a forced race of cost for a business, they will either shut down, limit staff, or make other alternatives. So this makes me wonder if this is basically the Arizona Restaurants Association's way of clapping back at the increase of minimum wage. It makes me wonder if that's why they're doing this, because they're like, well, we increased our minimum wage and that's put a dent on the restaurant. So we have to find a way to get that profit back. That's what it makes it seem like to me. So who opposes it? Raise the Wage Arizona. They're the ones that oppose it. What's interesting is I don't see any Democrat politicians that oppose this. So what does that tell you? The argument here is that if they're saying that the restaurants need to use the tips that the servers earn to cover their responsibility to pay the worker, then that restaurant's not a very good business. Businesses can afford to pay the workers a fair share, and there is no reason why the boss should get to take credit for the tip that the server earns. Oh, honey, I don't know. I'm not in Arizona, but I can see this becoming a problem if this one were to pass. So I'm not feeling good about that one, guys. Zero money spent to support or oppose. Commentary from Roger says, oh, hell to the no. Again, you know this was put on the ballot as a legislative referred and not by the citizens. Just look at who supports it and who opposes it. Right. Like that one is a woo. And then here's another big one, guys. And we'll end up finishing up Arizona tomorrow night. Proposition 139, the Right to Abortion Initiative. A yes vote supports amending the state constitution to provide the fundamental right to abortion that the state of Arizona may not interfere with before the point of fetal viability. I want to make sure I explain this correctly. That is defined as the point of pregnancy when there is significant chance of the survival of the fetus outside of the uterus without the application of extraordinary medical measures. Unless it is justified by compelling state interest defined as a law or regulation enacted for the limited purpose of improving or maintaining the health of the individual seeking abortion care that does not infringe on the individual's autonomous decision making. What is the status in Arizona? Currently in Arizona, abortion is legal for up to 15 weeks of pregnancy. So that's where it stands currently. And it goes on to say here, the Arizona State Senate voted 16-14 to pass the repeal on May 1st, 2024. In Arizona, a repeal can only take effect 90 days after the adjournment of the state legislature. May 13th, the Arizona Supreme Court granted a motion to stay the enforcement of the 1864 law until August 12, 2024. On June 15, 2024, the Arizona State Legislature adjourned, meaning that the bill repealing the ban will become effective before the court order that would have reviewed the law. Okay. Arizona for Abortion Access is leading the campaign in support of this initiative. Who supports it? The Democratic Party, Governor Katie Hobbs, Jackie Rawson, Athena Salmon. Organizations called Indivisible Project, ACLU of Arizona, Arizona Public Health Association, the League of Women Voters, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Arizona, the Fairness Project, and Think America. And here's one of the arguments. To the people across Arizona who are concerned about the future of abortion rights in our state, who are worried about their bodily autonomy, who don't want to see the freedoms of their wives, sisters, and daughters restricted, you can make your 2 cents known at the ballot box, and I encourage you to do so. Okay, guys. So again, this is another reason why I say if you do not want to vote for the president, whatever it is, what it is, but if you live in a ballot measure state, you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention to what's on the ballot for your state and at least go to vote for or against those ballot measures. That is very important. Because again, sometimes these things go by and people don't know about it and people are like, I didn't even know that passed. So this is important. It Goes Too Far is leading the campaign opposing the initiative. It is opposed by Priests for Life, Students for Life Action, and Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. And one of the arguments here says Governor Hobbs and her pro-abortion allies will pour millions into deceiving the voters about the upcoming amendment that permits abortion on demand when babies can feel pain and survive outside the womb. We must defeat this extreme measure that would force Arizonans to pay for abortions and eliminate health protections for women. That sounds so extreme there, with the way that she worded that. Now, there is campaign money spent to apply to this measure. It looks like there's over 21 million spent to support it and over 836,000 to oppose it. So just FYI, they put a lot of money into this one, folks. A lot of money. For the love of money. And this one, we're going to start with this one tomorrow night, Friday night. Ranked choice voting. This is a big one here for Arizona. You don't want to miss that. Friday night, come back and we'll finish up Arizona, because I'm always, paying attention to the ranked choice voting ones, because it didn't pass here in Massachusetts because people didn't understand the question. And I understand. I get it. Let's get that comment there on Rockfin, Eric. Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. Great show, Sabby. We have a pro-Palestine peace candidate on the ballot running in Connecticut against Jim Himes, a major supporter of arms to Israel and Ukraine. Wondering if you could have him on your show. He's Ben Wesley at benswesleyforcongress.com. He's worked to help Jose Vega get on the ballot. If you can email that to me, because I forget things after I get off stream. But yeah, Stephanie, just send me his contact info. Thank you. All right, guys, you can see some of these big measures that are appearing on the ballot for the states. And again, this is why this is not one of those channels where I tell people to stay home. I'm not telling you stay home. Don't stay home. Go out and vote, whether that's voting third party, independent. I don't support the two-party system. I don't support Republicans or Democrats, but voting third party, independent, or voting for the ballot measures, because some of these measures that are on the state ballot are really big. And especially, like I just told you, the one about the tip wages, that sounds a little crazy. So if you are a waitress or a bartender in Arizona, that will impact you. Please don't stay home. And if you know people that are waiting tables, make sure you tell them about that ballot measure in Arizona, because that could really mess up their money. Could really mess up their money. All right, guys, we'll finish Arizona tomorrow. And shout out to Regine Jolly for the super sticker. Thank you so much. I am going to go rest my voice and get some rest. I told you guys I'm sorry. I have a cold, so I'm sorry for the stuffiness, but I'm here. All right. And I am out. Love you guys. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.